Welcome into the MPW Digital Pregame Show presented by Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux. I'm Neal McCready. Ole Miss plays host to Austin Peay Saturday, 6:30 p.m. at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. The 20th ranked Rebels are 1-0 in the season after a 43-24 win over Louisville Monday night in Atlanta. Austin Peay is also 1-0 after a season-opening win over Chattanooga September the 2nd. Today on the show, we'll break down X's and O's with MPW Digital's resident football expert Pete DeWeese and talk SEC, National College, and NFL with Barstool Sports Ben Mintz and Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 ESPN in Memphis. Ryan Brown won't join us this week. He'll be back next week. He was speaking at a funeral today in Birmingham and had to bow out. We certainly wish the best to Ryan and all of those impacted by that. We'll also hear today from Ole Miss Athletics Director Keith Carter, who sat down with RebelGrove.com's Chase Parham on Thursday. But first, a word about Walk-Ons. Walk-On Sports Bistreaux puts everything they've got into bringing you game day with a taste of Louisiana. Dig into their mouth-watering Louisiana cuisine like po' boys, gumbo, and voodoo shrimp, plus fan favorites like juicy burgers and fresh salads, quality fresh ingredients you can't help but crave. Coming soon in November, Walk-On Sports Bistreaux, more than a restaurant, 1737B University Avenue in Oxford. Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux creates an environment that fosters growth and belonging for all, where the team is bigger than the individual, where they exceed expectations and positively impact every community they serve. Think you have what it takes to bring people together and provide a memorable game day experience? Visit 720 Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland to join their team today. Again, 720 Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland to join the Walk-Ons team today. Walk-Ons Sports Bistreaux, more than a restaurant. So I sat down with via Zoom with Pete DeWeese on Wednesday night. We talked a lot about Ole Miss's win over Louisville. We looked ahead to what the Rebels can expect from Austin Peay on Saturday night. So with that, here's Pete. I'll tell you what I told you last week, by the way. It's a very long interview. About a little 15, 20 minutes into it, we go to some graphs and some diagrams and such. I'll clean up the screen so that you can see that better at the time. It'll look a little clunky for 10, 15 seconds, but you might not even notice. Here's Pete. Our resident MPW Digital RebelGrove.com football expert, Pete DeWeese, kind enough to spend some time with us here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Ole Miss beats Louisville, Pete, as you know, 42-23, and heading to home to play Austin Peay on Saturday night. First of all, how are you?
I'm good. Quick turnaround from the game. Feel like it didn't end until midnight on Monday, and here we are on Wednesday recording this. So quick turnaround, but otherwise I'm good.
It's because it didn't end until midnight on Monday. All right, we'll start just a quick observation, just in general. What were your thoughts? I think you thought Ole Miss would beat Louisville fairly convincingly, and that's exactly what happened. So the game, you obviously know football, and the game went about, I think, the way you sort of thought it might go. What, if anything, sort of stood out to you in terms of as a surprising kind of a thing?
You know, I don't know about surprising, but I will say this. First and foremost, I think that the job that Wilson Love and his staff have done in the offseason, because you don't just see it in the way the kids look in the uniform or how they move. It's you can create a culture in the weight room. And that has clearly been part of the model since they stepped foot on campus. And last year, you don't get the full benefit of it. You get hired, you get hit with COVID, the kids aren't there, you're restricted on what you can do, things look different. Now you get the full off season. And from a speed perspective, defensively, the team speed defensively was phenomenal, right? And maybe, okay, you're comparing to Louisville and you're saying, well, can Louisville run? Louisville recruits a ton of Florida kids. They recruit a ton of Georgia kids. There are kids out of Louisville and out of the state of Kentucky, maybe not a ton, but they can run. So there's team speed. Malik Cunningham can run.
Oh, sure.
Right? And so I think when you see how the kids, even just in the way they played, you don't play with confidence when you don't feel confidently prepared in your body, right? In your physical conditioning. And so I think maybe not surprising, but that was the biggest thing to me from opening kickoff until I went to bed, was the physicality and the speed that they played with at most times throughout the course of the game. That was impressive.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's one of those things. I've had some people say, "Did you see that coming?" And it's like, well, I thought that's some of what I saw in preseason camp. The first 8 or 9 days we were allowed to see things, but you never know, right? Until you play on the field. Because I've been fooled before both ways, and yeah, there's no doubt that at least with their first 45-ish players, they look like an SEC program.
It's like you said, being fooled. It's, you watch kids in practice and they're going against people they're comfortable going against. They can play free. They can play reckless. There's not fans. There's not a television camera. There's not a commentator that's talking about the missed tackle, right? All of a sudden you're in the bins, the lights are on, the fans are going, not a huge crowd, but one of the bigger ones you've been around in a while, right? After last season. And you don't slow down. You don't, the hesitation's not there. And I think in the beginning, not offensively per se, but defensively, even offensively, they were who they are, but they weren't overly aggressive. I think they wanted to be smart, especially with the defense, and give their kids a chance to Louisville, we talked about last week, they do so much with their motion and the misdirection and stuff. Durkin, they wanted to let their kids play, fill things out, and all of a sudden it was the fuse was lit and kids were moving, and all of a sudden, they kept showing Durkin on the sideline with a smile on his face.
I just taped an interview with Jeffrey Wright, and I told Jeffrey I saw DJ Durkin smile more in one night than he smiled in 10 games last year.
Yeah, and it's a result. He has confidence in his kids in the way that they were playing, and you don't know how they're going to play because there's not a ton of those guys that have experience playing under you, right? I mean, yeah, they're kids back, but they're kids that you knew needed to take a step, right? So he probably wasn't smiling before the game, but it didn't take long for him to realize these kids are about to play hard and they're going to play fast, and that's going to give me a chance.
Let's start with the offense because it kind of tie this together. That Ole Miss defense, day in and day out, was going against that offense. And quite frankly, that can be a daunting thing because that quarterback for Ole Miss, too, is a stud now. I mean, people can talk about Spencer Rattler and you can talk about Howell, and I'm not taking anything away from those guys. But Bryce Young's not draft eligible. And outside of Bryce Young, I got to be honest, Pete. I think I've established myself that I'm not a homer. If I've got an NFL team and I'm taking a quarterback, literally the only guy that I saw Saturday or through the weekend, Saturday as a whole, that I would consider before Corral based off the one day is Young. And if someone told me, well, Neal, you can't take him yet because the rules don't allow it, I go, well, then give me the guy at Ole Miss.
It is the practice fields and the games for Ole Miss are going to be filled, and look, there've been scouts there, right? But the maturation and the growth, which is one of the things that I know you wrote about after the game, it's evident. Times where the first third down of the game, he takes the check down. He looks, everything's covered. He takes the check down. Ely turns, gets the first down, right? He's not trying to force the ball in there. There's a few times where he ran and slid. And first of all, he slid, right? He wasn't diving. He took some shots he probably shouldn't have taken. One, cost a kid the ball game, but, and should have probably two people at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. And, but he's trying to protect himself. He's trying to protect the football. He's starting to understand, I think. He's always been confident, and you don't. Two types of players go out and have the type of games he had against Arkansas last year. Guys that have way too much confidence and maybe overconfident in their ability, and they try to force things. And then guys that just flat out aren't good. Well, we can throw the aren't good part out the window because we know where that stands. So from an ability standpoint, he's starting to understand that I am that good. The guys around me can help me be that good. But if we're not on the field, it doesn't matter, right? So he's starting to learn to live, play the next play, to know the opportunity is going to come later.
Yeah, I wrote about it, so I'm not going to berate it. You know, that game last season against Arkansas in Fayetteville was a game that everyone continues to talk about. And so he knew he was going to see some of that. First, kudos to Barry Odom and the people at Arkansas. He had a great plan, and it worked. But Matt had to live with that for 11 months. And he obviously knew it was coming again. And I think that's what Brian Brown and Louisville, I know it was a little different and stuff, but it was essentially the same general idea. Brian Brown was like, you're not going to beat us deep. You're not. You're not going over the top. We're going to make you make decisions. We're going to try to trick you into thinking something's available, and then we're going to close it. We're going to see if you make a bad read, and we're going to make you pay for it. And Corral said, nope, not going to do that. I'm just going to cut you. I'm not going to stab you to death here and slash you. I'm just going to cut you, and you're going to slowly bleed to death. And that's kind of what happened. And I wrote about this, and you're a football guy, so tell me if I'm wrong. If I'm an opposing defensive coordinator down the road, I look at that and go, what worked a year ago might not work now. I'm going to have to take some chances. And when I take chances, I'm freeing him up to do what he loves to do, and that's score from far and big play and all of that. I just thought, man, in terms of squashing some of the killing some of the ghosts from a year ago, and also sending some messages to future opponents, I thought it was an A+ day for him.
You talk about Brian Brown, and I guarantee there's some calls that he'd like to have back, and there's some fits that he'd like to see kids play a little differently and do some things. But I can tell you his game plan wasn't bad. He fit some things and did some things, and he tried to protect that deep ball. And in doing so, Ole Miss was able to attack and find windows. And part of that is not only on Corral, but it's in Levy and the design of the offense and calling things and some of the things that they do to kind of window dress. But, we kind of used the boxer analogy at some point in our talk last week.
We did.
He was willing to throw jabs, right? And you throw enough jabs, they start to really hurt. And I think the one point in the night that I thought you saw frustration was after one of the called back touchdowns or big plays, and he kind of bends over and he, because he's frustrated, he's a competitor, he wants it. But then as soon as he did it, the next shot was him picking guys up, right? And that's something that's been talked about too, is I think from a developmental standpoint, not only as a player, but as a leader, as you grow more and more confident, not just in your ability, but in who you are as an individual, it's easier to be a leader. Right.
For sure.
And that doesn't matter if you're in the business world, in my profession, or you're a college football player. As he's grown more confident in who he is as a young man, it's made him not only a better player, but a better leader. And so you talk about those NFL scouts, right? To go and see the brash kid that maybe makes a few too many mistakes and puts it all on his sleeve, right? To see the kid that can take that same energy and is now hopefully harnessed it to some degree.
Yeah.
That's what you want to see if you're going to invest millions of dollars in somebody, in my opinion.
No doubt. I think Matt will look back on that Arkansas game of 2020 and go, one of the best things that ever happened to me, which is kind of the way life works. A lot of times adversity turns out to be good for you. All right. Speaking of, I want to get here because it's easy to go 43 points, had points taken off that probably shouldn't have been taken off, a shaky call on a little play that should have been a touchdown, this, that, and the other. That being said, they did some things on the ground. Matt Corral had a good game on the ground. Snoop Connor had some pretty good runs. Parrish had a great run late. Ely had some moments. But I watched up front some because I like to try to make myself do that. And there were times where, if I'm honest, I was kind of looking for a little bit more than what I saw from Ole Miss's offensive line. What did you see up front kind of as we start to move forward?
I think that I think one thing you see on the plays that are truly them trying to get downhill and be aggressive, I think it's a combination of maybe not so much experience as it is cohesion, right? You take the center who transfers in and is a good player, but he's also missed part of camp, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he missed a good bit of camp.
Right. So you missed part of camp and not, you haven't been there with the guys forever. and then you miss part of camp and you're still the guy. So you get the minutes, right? But there's times where maybe the communication or just the feel when you're working those zone schemes that they like to run and you're working combos, feeling when your backside help arrives so that you can climb up and get to the second level and pass the D lineman off. There were some times I thought, not just him, but he's an easy example, where we passed things off before we should have. We left guys in combos where we should have stayed on them a little longer. And some of that, I think they got a few different looks from Louisville than what they anticipated at some. There are times where I think what Louisville did from the way they chose to fit the run game helped them. But the other thing you kind of have to understand is how Ole Miss chooses to attack in the run game. The way you run the football now is not Tom Osborne in Nebraska all the time. And even
it's not
Alabama,
even the old school Dallas Cowboys where you have Johnston in front of Emmett Smith.
Yes, it is a different ball game now. Now look, that there's times where 100% the goal is to get downhill, and the fact that they were able to get under center and run power and hand it to a tailback and get in the end zone is something that Ole Miss fans have longed for, because nobody wants to see a tight end get in the shotgun and catch a snap anymore.
I don't know who it was.
We went through those years.
I don't know. Someone on the message board, Pete, when they lined up under center, we had three guys in the backfield and handed it and scored. Someone goes, "It moved," and I thought, yeah, I get it.
And completely right, because they moved the line of scrimmage, and they did it in a personnel package that, like we talked last week about the inexperience at tight end, right? They did it in a personnel package where they had 3 or 4 tight ends on the field. And that's not a place that we expect to be a strength, but yet against a good football team, they did it and it was successful. So I think, just those things obviously are positive. They will play better defensive fronts than Louisville. That's not an argument. That's not a knock on Louisville. We play Alabama. We play Auburn, who Texas A&M, the way that they recruit box players on defense every year, I mean, it's unbelievable. So, there will be tougher tests, but I think some of the things that I read and people, and I'm not saying that the offensive line was perfect, and I'm not telling you there weren't mistakes. There's never been a game in the history of football, a game one, where you walk out and you're satisfied with your pad level and you're satisfied with your combos and your communication on the offensive line. Never. Okay. And if you are, you probably played somebody really bad and you get humbled pretty quickly thereafter.
Yeah.
So, so there's definitely room for improvement, but I think some of the plays in particular where people were frustrated, I think when you understand what they're really trying to do, you understand that this is not the road grader, drive everybody downfield 5 yards and just steamroll people. That's not how they want to play, because that's not what suits their quarterback and the guys they have on the outside. So I diagrammed a couple things. The game just happened. I am not connected enough to already have copies of the game film. So I did diagram a couple things that I'll show you here in a sec that'll hopefully kind of explain some of that stuff to you. And will make sense, I hope.
Okay. Just tell me when you're ready to do that.
Yeah, we can do it now. I'll go ahead and share, and we'll jump into some of kind of the review.
Okay.
Going to kind of start just reviewing last week one being what it was, and then leading into Austin Peay. I thought that kind of taking a look back made sense before we take a look forward, to just, kind of address some of the concerns and maybe harness some of the excitement. From an offensive standpoint, the production speaks for itself. It doesn't matter who you're playing. You go over 40, in particular when you had some called back. You're having a good night. There's a lot of carryover from what they did in 2020. We talked last week about the tight ends and how they're going to use them. And I talked a little bit about how they protected Yeboah at times, right? And a lot of the same things that they did were things that I saw on film Monday night, right? So they're taking capable bodies. They're using them in similar fashion in the passing game, maybe just not there with the experience and the trust that they had in Yeboah. But in the run game too, when they asked the tight end to be a factor in the run game, they put him in a situation to be successful. Okay. Which I think was nice. They used a lot of the same base run concepts. And, the big thing that I think Kiffin and Levy probably do as well as anybody in football is the way they attack the middle of the field. Yeah. They'll kill you in the seams. They'll get you in the middle of the field. And it's even impressive that when defenses close the middle of the field, when they play a cover 3 type coverage, where in theory there's a safety sitting high in the middle of the field that's going to protect all that stuff, they find ways to manipulate. And typically you do that in the seams, and modern defenses have answers for how they protect that. But they do a phenomenal job of pressing those seams and finding ways to get guys open down the seam and down the middle. And again, a lot of carryover from last year and how they chose to do it. The difference is now you're moving the pieces where instead of 11, instead of 8, it's 11, right? And so that, but definitely a lot of carryover. Moving forward, things that I'd expect to see or hope to see. You want to get a little more production from the outside receivers. Some of it the other night was they didn't have to, right? They were finding those seams down the middle. The other piece of it is, when they got it to Mingo, he was good, right? But some of what Louisville was doing, I think, was trying to take some of that stuff away.
Let me ask you this. I'm curious. You're a coach. You're an offensive coach. So this really applies to you. When you obviously, and going into a game, hey, we got a good shot here, and it goes your way, and at some point it's 26-0, and you're not losing. Do you say, hey, this is game 1. I don't want to put too much on film. Let's be careful here. Does that cross your mind? Maybe not as much in the high school level but if you were a college coach where everybody's really dialing into you?
To some degree, it happens at every level. I would love to know how much they truly carry into a game, right? Most offenses are going to have anywhere from maybe 16 to 24 plays that are hang our hat. We're going to run them almost every week. We may tweak a thing here or there. And then they're going to carry additional things on top of that are a little bit more game plan specific. So when it comes to that, right, if it's a game plan specific thing that it works because of what you're doing to combat what they're doing, you run it, right? Because the next week it's probably out because the defense does something completely different. Okay. The other stuff, the this is our home. These are the 20 things we're doing every week, no matter who we play. You run it because it's what you do. It's going to be on film. You're building things that you try to have answers. So no matter what the defense does, in theory, there's an opportunity for success, right? Okay. And then there's always the ancillary stuff that, hey, I like this week. Maybe you don't show that, right? There's probably some trick plays, some red zone specific plays that they've been working 2 or 3 times a week for a couple of weeks now, and you don't run it because you don't need to, right? So there's elements of hey, run it. It doesn't matter. We're doing it all the time. And then there's elements of, hey, let's hold off on this. We don't need it.
The Italian restaurant that has 2 or 3 staple dishes that are always there.
Always, right? I mean, that's it. And some nights, they may realize they got extra eggplant in the back and make a new special, right? And then other nights they don't. It's just it's kind of a feel for what you need, and then also again knowing, hey, we're probably not pulling this back out for another 4 weeks, so let's get it. Let's do it. It's going to help, So that's a part of it. What you wonder on my end, as you watch is, Drummond keeps getting the ball, one, because of play design, but also because it's there, right? It doesn't matter how you design the play. If it's not there, he's not getting the ball. So it doesn't mean it was always designed to go to him. It's just where it ends up. So you do wonder sometimes, is there a point when you get up, especially where they look around and go, okay, hey, 10 hadn't been on the field much. Let's get 10 on the field and let's try to get him involved, right? Hey, 1 hadn't caught a ball. Let's get it to him, right? So because you want to get your playmakers involved, young guys, you want to see how they respond to certain things. And so there's a mixture of that too. It's hey, we may not show this, but what can we do to put the ball in his hands or potentially put it in his hands and see how he responds and what he can do with it, right? Because there is a balance of, hey, when we show them we got 6 guys out wide that we can do things with and they're fun toys to play with that can go make things happen, you put that on film because you want that defensive coordinator to sit there and go, crap, there's 6 of them? Really? You know?
Yeah.
So there's a balance, I think, of what you protect and what you show.
Okay. I asked that because you talk about Plumlee's role expanding, the use of the running backs in the passing game, which is one of the things that, frankly, I was sort of looking for on Monday night that I didn't see. And I wonder if they're not doing this because schematically it's not there, or if they're not doing this because they just don't want to show it yet because they don't have to. And I didn't know that answer.
You know, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, they had, you know, other than the check down to Ely and a couple other check downs in the game, they had a couple times where they hit the running back down the seam for some balls and did some different things. You know, I think some of the things they did last year, you know, we didn't necessarily see a true wheel route that wasn't a play action kind of designed thing. They would do some things last year. They had some kind of unconventional screens they would do with the running backs and even some boot stuff where they would get the running back involved. And you didn't necessarily see any of that, right? Doesn't mean it's not there. But I think that because of the skill set and the kids they have, you're going to continue to see those guys catching balls out of the backfield. And part of that does also, you know, if teams are going to play the drop 8 and if teams are going to try to protect and prevent all the deep ball and they don't want to get the score from far, hashtag lit on them, you know, 4 times a game, then you're going to see those check downs and those type of things happen. So, yeah, I think you'll see a lot of that stuff ahead. You know, I'm curious to see what happens with 10, you know. He clearly can give you some things there. But again, he's a kid that, you know, he's playing baseball in the spring. And so
he had a play, Pete, and I can't, third quarter, maybe in fourth quarter, where they were clearly trying to, hey, we're going to get it to him. And there was a play where he just didn't get the read right. You know, he didn't realize that the guy, I think a guy cut down and that would have opened it up for him on a quick read. And he was still running.
It was the slant and he didn't cross face. And I think I know exactly which one you're talking about. And that's one of those things where from an ability standpoint, you know what he can give you. Right. But there's a growth process for him as well in that position, doing something different,
sure,
and not being able to do it full time because he does have other commitments. And so, you know, I think you'll continue to see, I think it's going to be real interesting just to see, you know, I think he's going to be a kid that, for lack of a better word, they have fun with, you know?
Yeah.
There's going to be things where, whether you're using his speed and as a receiver, as a ball carrier, on trick plays, whatever the case may be, you know, I'm curious to see kind of what that develops into. What you don't know right now is, does he turn into an every down receiver again? Because there's guys that have just been doing that all their lives and have been, you know, they were doing it all spring. And then here's a kid who's been doing something else. And so his natural ability is going to give you a lot, but he's also going to have to learn some of the nuance of the position.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, talking about the offense, one of the things, you know, obviously we were talking about the run game. And so I'm going to talk about the very first play Ole Miss ran, right? Ole Miss, I guess after a penalty on the kickoff return, kind of backed up a little bit.
At their own 5.
Yep. And so what they do is they come out with what's one of their base plays. So they, what they do is they come out and they run an inside zone. And however they call it, however it's tagged, this is not the traditional, we are going to go combo this guy and maul him and go sit the combo in the Mike linebacker's lap. It can't be, because you have an RPO out here that if your lineman's downfield, that long run to Drummond gets called back, right? So they come out on the first play, and what they do, they go and you block on the front side. And when you watch it, you see these receivers are really patient getting into the block. They don't want to be blocking downfield either, right? You get the zone run game here where the O-line is, you know, so I've heard people call it a stall technique. I've heard people, you know, call it, you know, playing flat, whatever the case you want to call it. They're not looking to get upfield in a hurry. And the thing is, when you do it a lot, you start to realize when these guys get fast downhill, chances are a ball's coming. So I can now be more aggressive and get to him, right? That or it's a blitz. And so the contact is going to be made relatively close to the line of scrimmage, because on the back side of it, they're giving Drummond this glance route or slant route, and then they're giving Mingo, in this case, a hitch on the outside.
Okay.
So you're basically telling him you're going to put your eyes, they probably tell him put your eyes on the first thing over or inside of the slot receiver. And his goal is to push him vertical. And if this guy's down, he's going to now try to cross the face of the safety. If this guy stays on him, it's probably a handoff if it's like a man-to-man type look, right? And if this guy just kind of pops his feet, and if you part of the slow action in the backfield is you get the back here and corrals in this kind of shuffle position. If he can get behind him and open this space up, you can pull it and you can pop it in there. But you can't do that if your linemen are downfield, right? If you pull it and all of a sudden things have gone to mess and you didn't get the look that you wanted because suddenly this safety comes to cut the chin, you have hopefully now, if this safety's down, you're hoping that means some type of a soft coverage, which gives you kind of an outlet on the hitch on the backside. But it all takes time. So if you watch it, you might think it's play action, but it's not, because if it was, these two guys wouldn't be blocking, right? That's kind of a guarantee. So it's a run pass option where he's got the chance now to hand it to the back or work this glance RPO. But they, if you're thinking, man, that's a run play, I can tell it's a run play, he chose to throw it, why isn't the offensive line getting pushed? Well, they can't, right?
Yeah, because you saw that get called, even though I thought it was a bad call. You get 2-3 yards down, things get iffy.
It's going to be a point of emphasis, right? Now, some of the things that potentially could be a little concerning, when you look at it, is if you look at how Louisville defended it, right? It's similar at times to what Ole Miss was trying to do. So this overhang defender, instead of being really out here over this receiver, was more apexing, and he was kind of splitting that difference. So as they got this action, okay, as far as the offensive line is concerned, the way this presents itself is they basically have 5-on-5 right here, okay? So what happens is they start to communicate everything. We're working our combos in some form or fashion, or working our zone for these 5 defenders. Well, what happened early on one of the zone runs, and I don't recall if it was the first play, was what they were doing is they were working what's known by as a fold fit. So he would take this outside gap. He's here to help occupy him. They're letting these guys backdoor the fit now. So if Corral pulls it, the wheel is there for him. And now he is able to slide to the cutback created by the running back. As you start getting movement, this gap moves, he fits the natural cutback, because that tailback is being taught, press it, and then look to bend it, right? So now what they do is they take this overhang who's not accounted for in the run scheme and fold him back inside. So you go look at some of these runs and it's like, man, there's a guy standing in the hole. The back's got nowhere to go. Well, in the scheme, he's not accounted for. So there are adjustments you can make on the sideline that allow you to account for him. The other option is you bring him in now and you gain an extra hat to potentially account for him. So there's things that they can do. They also open themselves up to other type of passing game and different elements. But so there's times I think where people are watching the offensive line and they're saying, they're not getting any movement, and again, I think part of it is scheme, right? It's designed to give Corral the chance to throw it. But then part of it too is just understanding how their zone game's working, how Louisville is choosing to backdoor the zone and fold in this unaccounted for player, because this guard, as he steps and he goes outside and he looks to climb to the mic, and that mic's gone to the backside, his instinct is going to be turned back to this nose. And unless you've seen it on film and made the adjustment and communicated it with one another, you don't see this fold fit right here, and the back can end up running right into it.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So that's kind of some of the things that you see Ole Miss doing to attack, and some of the way Louisville tried to kind of combat what they were doing. One of my favorite things that Ole Miss does, and they've got a few different ways of doing it, and they did it to Plumlee with him in the backfield against Indiana, and they did it with Ely on the first drive the other night. It might have been second play of the game, actually. So into the boundary, close to the hash over here, these two receivers condensed their split a little bit, okay? And they turned and they brought him in a jet sweep motion. Now, one thing that we've seen Ole Miss do in the run game is they run what people call power read. They take it's a modern version of the old school power play, where typically you are blocking down on the front side, maybe with combos, maybe not. You're pulling for the front side linebacker, and now the quarterback is going to read the C gap defender or the defensive end, depending on how you teach it.
Okay.
So when they do that, right, what Corral's doing is if the end is upfield, he would pull it and follow the guard inside. They ran it for a gain the other night. He got like 9 or 10 yards on a first or second down, I think, got him into a third manageable type situation. And it's effective. His legs make it effective. The speed that you attack the edge with makes it effective, right? And when you do it off of this jet motion, you get the back out in front to now go lead in case that ball is handed off. So one of the things that Ole Miss likes to do off of this is, whether they do it with a guy in motion or a back in the backfield, is they show the same power read look. So we're down. He's going to set inside and then protect this backside gap. But now, instead of him pulling and turning up for the linebacker, he's going to settle and he's going to now build the wall and protect C gap.
Okay.
On the outside, they're putting these two guys, they are stressing the seam, and they put them on a vertical switch concept. So you're playing with the eyes, right? This overhang is probably thinking, I better go attack the run. If I don't, I'm in a lot of trouble. The safety sees this outside receiver attacking him vertically, and if he doesn't carry it, it's a home run over the top, because this backside safety has a long way to go to get there.
Yeah, he's not going to get there.
Right? The corner, at the same time, who, if they're playing cover 2, may be told, I'm a force fitter, which means it's my job to come build the wall and force everything back inside of me. Well, that's hard to do when this Y comes right off the hip of the outside receiver and gets into this wheel route. Because, again, if I attack, you're now asking me to play 2 guys. If I roll coverage, which some teams will do, they'll do what's called cloud the coverage, where the corner now forces, I'm outside third, I'm middle third. Again, that's a long way for this safety to go, right? What Ole Miss does now is they add a third player to the mix, and that's this back that looks like he's coming out of the backfield to block, now goes right past this defender, and he divides those two. So you end up with both a horizontal stretch on the defense and a vertical stretch on the defense.
And so you're making the strong safety in the corner make decisions and communicate that decision in a way that the communication has to be effective, or there's a chance that two guys try to cover one and leave 2 open.
I'm not going to tell you it's impossible to defend. You can defend anything, because if the nose comes through, you've defended the play.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
If you have the right blitz on, you've defended the play.
Right.
There are ways to defend it, but
you have to defend it away from that area right there. You have to defend it at the line of scrimmage.
Yep. But what they're trying to do, they're trying to create conflict for defenders, mess with their run pass reads, and then they're trying to stress their defenders by putting guys on different levels. Well, vertically, you've set a level here because you have these 2 guys attacking now, and there's some subtlety to this route of showing like I'm blocking, and he gets aggressive going and finding this hole. So now I have this vertical, level where I'm here and here, but I've also created this horizontal stretch with the seam and the vertical. So you're essentially flooding this outside the hash, this third of the field, with 3 different vertical routes. And there's not defensive structures that are built to stop that, when also given a very aggressive run read. So whether he reads it inside out to the back or whether it's 100%, I'm keyed in on my back here, right? You put a lot of stress on the defense now, and he was able to hit Ely down the seam for a pretty good gain right there on that first drive. It can be a very difficult thing, especially when you run it into the short side of the field like Ole Miss did here.
And correct me if I'm wrong, please, but also if you're going in with the defensive mindset of we are not going to let them beat us over the top, which means we're only going to rush 3, we're going to try to drop 8, we're going to do all that, it gets really complicated calculus defensively.
100%, because I have to play the run. I have to play the run. Everything about what the line's doing, from stepping down to the pulling guard, everything shows me run. And when these guys have been told don't get beat over the top, they're getting out of there. The route lifts them out, right? So as these guys react to the run, you open up that nice natural window there for the tailback. So there's a lot of pick your poison from the sense of, hey, are we going to go fit the power read aggressively and just live with it if he gives it or pulls it for that matter? Or are we going to be aggressive on the run and live with it if they hit us in the seam? So it's not something you see done a lot. Or, team's not going to do it 8 times a game. But Ole Miss, I think, may have done it twice the other night and were effective doing it. They may have done it more than that, and I missed it.
I don't know if you're ready to do this. Well, you got another offensive play. I was going to ask you about a defensive question, but go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get to it. One of the other things, that we saw Ole Miss do the other night, and this is, I think, it was down there, first drive before the touchdown. One of the things that Ole Miss has done a good bit of in the past is they like to run in the red zone, and they'll do it in a lot of situations. They'll do it in the open field. They like it in short yardage, but they will run this RPO where you are going to block here, and they're going to bring him behind the line into the flat.
Yeah.
And they're going to read this backside end. And if, some teams call it, some teams read it. I think
you say, just for the people that don't quite understand, in this case, Corral, the quarterback, his key is this backside end.
Most likely, okay. It could be just a designed, hey, we're throwing it no matter what.
Okay.
I believe, and actually on this play, I think, as a matter of fact, they did hand it off. So he is probably reading that backside end.
Okay.
Okay. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to show zone run action this way. And if this end steps down to play the run, you pull it and you hope that you have numbers on the outside now to throw it. If it's man to man, and this comes down to that having your eyes in the right place, right? Communicating. Mm-hmm. If it's man to man, you are going to push like you're blocking and then go crack on the inside defender, hoping I trail, but now we've essentially blocked this guy plus vacated these 2 defenders because of their rules, right? So there's some nuance in it there. And then you're trying, like I said, to slip him across because in theory, if someone's responsible for him man to man, it's one of these guys.
And he's going to get caught up in a lot of that traffic.
Exactly. You may have this guy who's trying to read him as well. But again, you're going to try to force him to fight through everything to go make that play. Well, what Louisville did to combat it is he's outside in this gap. So he's here. He can be downfield now because this RPO we're throwing behind the line of scrimmage and not downfield, right? So he was here, and what they did was, again, they played that same kind of lag technique that I showed you earlier where he's here and this guy actually fits it here, probably misfitted. He probably saw the quarterback open this direction and scraped the wrong way, but it worked for him because they had a stunt on the front side. They brought him all the way to here. They brought him here, and they gain him coming down now because he did not have to chase the Y. He was counting on a teammate to pick him up on the other side. So from a gap perspective, everywhere now is covered, right? They're sound against the run game. And if this guy gives you the read you want, you have to hope that you win on the outside. So On this particular one, if I remember what happened, the center stepped here and felt the nose go back door and tried to turn and take it, got, kind of beat by the movement, and opened the opportunity for him now to come through and make the play in the backfield. So we go back to that continuity we were talking about earlier with the offensive line.
Yeah. So in this case, this is where you have to acknowledge Chance Campbell and I talked about this earlier in the week, right? Brian Brown gets paid to come up with schemes too, and he doesn't go over. I mean, in this case, he had a good call.
He had a good call, and it's one of those again where, he's thinking I have anything essentially from my nose to my nose. Well, he's out here on the tackle's nose. So when he does what's called the big stick, which is you're slanting inside and you're taking two gaps, okay, as soon as he sees the guard step out, he's crossing the guard's face. So you have a lot of trust as an offensive lineman because this guard has to trust the center to take him over. This center has to trust the guard to take him over. So when he goes backside, if there's any breakdown in that communication or trust right there, you're potentially getting a free runner, right? And so that's essentially what happens. So we talk about, there are those plays where Ole Miss doesn't get the push by design. There's plays like this where you want the push, you expect the push, you need the push.
Yeah. And
it's going to be a matter of continuity and just getting all those guys on the same page up front. Not a ton more offensively that I want to show you, but just, one thing we kind of highlighted the other night was one of the things that they did to kind of protect Yeboah was how they would work their zone game here. And they would just ask him to kind of root and dig this wall right here, right? It's not having to be overly physical, but you're just creating the gap. So again, Louisville came back, very similar scheme. They're getting a safety that can fold in now. They're backdooring with their linebackers, trying to do some things there. But Ole Miss was able to have success because after they'd seen it a couple times, they were able to trust their tracks a little bit better in the zone game and now help the tight end build the wall so that as that safety fit in, they were able to still find some creases. So as the game went on, they saw it on the field. They talked about it on the sidelines. You did see some adjustment and you did see some growth. So again, taking the way that they were choosing to play the backside with their backers and the way that they were choosing to fold fit this outside defender was fairly consistent from Louisville. Ole Miss recognized that Ole Miss made the adjustment and improved in that. And that's one of the things that you really want to see from both the coaching staff and from the players, that they can adapt right there. So I thought that was one thing when we talk about offensive line play that was encouraging as the game went on.
Okay. You ready to get to defense?
Yeah, ready to get to defense.
Right, the big question, Pete, was, hey, they're running a 3-2-6. Is that sustainable? Does that work? And it's where I get it because I watched during camp the first 8 or 9 days that we were allowed to watch, and I noticed a lot of 3-2-6, but it's getting hung up in labels.
Yes.
Because Otis Reese is labeled, and Jeffrey and I talked about this. So for those of you that listen to this entire show or watch this entire show, you're going to hear a little bit of repetitiveness because it is what it is. Otis Reese is listed as a defensive back, a nickel back. And so you think, well, he's a defensive back. But if he lines up as a defensive end on that play, he's a defensive end. If he lines up as a linebacker on that play, he's a linebacker. It was kind of like, I watch a lot of basketball, right? And sometimes everybody goes, okay, well, he's a power forward. Yeah, he's listed as a power forward, but sometimes
but when he's bringing the ball up the court, he's not a power forward.
Yeah, sometimes he plays the 3, and sometimes he kind of plays the 1, and sometimes he plays a 1 bringing it up, and he moves into the 3, and so it's positionless. And I think there's a lot of football that has become sort of positionless in certain spots, especially when you have a collection of guys who can play different positions, if you will, and can make different things happen. Where now you're DJ Durkin and you're saying, okay, well, maybe against Team X, I'm better off using Otis Reese as a safety, but against Team Y, more of the time, I kind of want him closer to the line of scrimmage because he can pick this guy up or he can whatever. You're going to be able to explain this better than me, but it's a 3-2-6, yeah, sorta, but not really. It's that guy that you're including in the 6 is sometimes one of the 3, and he's sometimes one of the 2, and sometimes he's one of the 6.
Yeah, so this kind of version of defense, like everything in football is cyclical. Things come in fashion, they go out of fashion, and then they come back in with a twist. And so, the way that teams are playing now, Jolie Dunn was putting 5 and 6 defensive backs on the field in the early 90s and doing some good things. And then people kind of caught up a little bit with what he was doing. And, somebody on the board the other day talked about when Cutcliffe brought in Chuck Driesbach and from TCU and look, the stuff that he was doing in the 4-2-5 was really good stuff. But part of the issue is when you change defenses and you're hedging your bet on something, and you change coordinators in particular, the way that Cut did with Driesbach is you have to go and recruit that personnel, right? And so Driesbach gets on campus, and there's guys like Kelvin Robinson, who was a natural fit in that defense. Eric Oliver was a natural fit in that defense, but they really didn't have all the other pieces, maybe at certain positions that they needed to recruit for, right? And so, last year, if Ole Miss tries to run this defense, people aren't happy because I don't think the experience and your transfers aren't eligible at that point, and a lot of things are different. You get through the season, you look at your depth chart, your strengths, your weaknesses. And at that point, I think they're sitting there and they're looking at a lot of guys that have hybrid ability, right? You have some guys that have gone back and forth from corner to safety. You have guys that have gone back and forth from safety to that husky or star position, whatever, different teams call it, that play down closer to the box a little bit. And the roster just defensively, I think they're full of those kids, right? So this style of defense, a lot of people credit the Iowa State staff and Matt Campbell and what they've done in that conference, where arguably they're playing against guys that are, from a Jimmy's and Joe's standpoint, maybe a little ahead of them, and they've been able to generate a lot of success. But also you look at Cincinnati and what they've done the past couple of years defensively with a very similar, maybe a little bit more aggressive version of the same defense. And, he writes that check now to go be at Notre Dame as the defensive coordinator. And so a lot of teams have kind of come to it. And so, when I started thinking about the defensive recap, the biggest thing to me was the way that they fit the run plays, the speed and aggression they played with, and the way that they tackled absolutely is better than what we've seen in a while from an Ole Miss defense.
Yeah. You could not know football at all and see it.
It evident, right? And, and so that first and foremost above scheme, but what the scheme does, I think, is they found a way to get a lot of kids in a natural home for them, right? To allow them to be aggressive. And one of the things is this is a very versatile defense from what you can do as a coach. And the fact that I don't think they were overly complicated the other night. Okay. But with all the shifts and the motions and everything that Louisville does, the fact that they rarely had a miscue and nothing really that just overly exposed them, other than, hey, quarterback gets out of the pocket to kick and run, other than some of that kind of stuff, I think really shows you how much confidence and that the kids have in the scheme and how much they've kind of taken to it.
Yeah. Chance and I talked about this, Pete, a little bit earlier in the week. There were a couple plays in the second half where, credit to the kid, right? Malik Cunningham just made a play.
Made a great play.
Chance was in the proper position, and Malik just, got him on that play. There were a lot of plays where Chance got Cunningham, but there was a couple times in the second half where you got to tip your hat a little bit and go, hey,
and there's
a good player.
There's not a team on the schedule that's not going to happen with.
Sure,
there's good players there. Guys, when Ole Miss plays Liberty and Malik Willis is at quarterback, they're going to make plays.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Like the kid's a stud, right? Next week, Scotty Walden, Austin Peay, they're going to do some things at some point. Somebody's going to make a play, and it's the nature of football. The thing that people, are kind of asking about, right, is can it hold up? There's going to be a point where Alabama puts 2 tight ends in the ball game, and they get behind one of the best offensive lines in college football, and you're not going to be able, if they choose to commit to it and live in it, you're probably not going to be able to live with the guys you want to base out of being on the field. So you build packages, and they're going to have them.
This is where, not to interrupt you, but this is where these next few weeks are so important to develop Isaiah Aiton. Lane talked about getting Taiwan Malone on the field, getting those guys in. It's a chess match. It's a long play. And so you've got to get those guys ready so that in the event that Alabama goes, you're not going to do this with us. We have the personnel to just shove this up your whatever body orifice you want to pick, where you have to go, okay, well, we've got to commit to something different with a different personnel set with guys that you maybe weren't available on Labor Day but are available first week of October.
If Ole Miss can continue to win right there, they will change the bodies here as needed to fit what they're facing.
Yeah.
They will build sub packages. If these guys hold up, right? If those interior 3 can hold up, they'll be fine. If you look at it, kind of what they did, and I just thought I would go through the anatomy, and I'm kind of focusing a little bit on the first drive because it showed a lot, I think, about what was going on.
Sure. But
as Ole Miss comes out, I honestly couldn't see this safety, so I can't tell you exactly where he was. But pre-snap, they come out in a 2x2, looks like a 4-wide formation, and then they take their tight end and they motion him across and they park him right here. So now they've added an extra gap to this side. So part of what happens in this defense is there's so much versatility now on the back end. You can play a myriad of coverages. You can change up what roles are for players. And we talk about having our eyes in the right place and communicating. We talked about the importance of that last week and how fans get tired of hearing it. But the way that Ole Miss handled their communication and the way they got things done was outside of just the aggression that they played with defensively, was probably the most impressive thing to me. Here on this particular play, as he comes down, we see this guy tighten. He knows right now I'm probably coming down to be my force player. They slanted here and brought the linebacker here. Okay. But what they've done now is they've gone here, and very similar to what we saw out of Louisville, as he motioned, we're able to now come get closer to the box. So as things happen, he now has the ability to get over the top and be free. He's protected. There's not an offensive player on this side of the center that can get to him in the run scheme. So this gives, whether it's Robinson or Campbell or somebody else, a chance to scrape and run over the top and play free.
Most of the time, the mic is Campbell, right? The wheel was Robinson to start.
I believe so.
Okay.
And look, there's not a guarantee that I've got the alignment or the strength perfect and any of that stuff. But even if run comes this way now, right, and the guard can get to him, they still have this player that now has the ability to fold back inside and protect this gap. So from that standpoint, they have now built a box that might, on paper, it looks like, oh man, there's 3 down linemen and then some DBs out there. Let's go run the football. But the whole defense is built on, I'm going to secure B gap. I'm going to find a way to occupy A gap, and I'm going to funnel the ball out to all this speed. And I'm going to let these guys come rally. And okay, you're going to get some 5, 6, 7 yard gains, but we're going to make you chunk us down the field. And when we need to, we're going to try to turn the key and turn up some pressure. And we're going to try to create some situations now where we can get you in negative plays and get you behind the chains. And that's exactly what they were able to do. As these guys started to motion, you started seeing guys communicating and moving, and you didn't see Ole Miss misfitting things, which, whether it was a zone play or a gap scheme, I thought was extremely encouraging. They come out second play of the game. They're in a second and long type situation, I believe. And they start out, they've already got the tight end attached. And this is actually one of the plays that I had shown you last week on our preview. And they called it, I think, their second play of the game. They took this receiver and they motioned him back in, and they faked their zone this way, and they booted out the backside. So what they did here was they built some type of like an out route or a comeback here. He was down to secure the edge, leaked out late, and they brought this guy in the flat back across on the bootleg, and then you had some type of a backside drag, right? So as they did that, as they motioned, Ole Miss, the way that they reacted is they came in, they brought him down now and took him back to play this cover 3 look, so that now if it's run back this way, you get a bigger body immediately in position to go force the run, turn it back into all his help. But at the same time, if it does turn into the play action, now you get the cover guy back to help protect on this big post or whatever it might be. Okay. Gotcha. So as he spins down with the motion, you also saw that that he rotated as well. Okay. So as they start to rotate everything, he now, as this guy comes in the flat, he saw that he sees action. That star sees action this way. He didn't lose his eyes. He didn't chase it. He sat and was patient, let the action come to him. So he's here. He's now on top of that flat route. As soon as Chase Campbell saw the action away, he starts it. And when he recognizes boot, he now becomes what's known as the flush player. And he has no coverage responsibility now. He's all about pull up the quarterback, make him get out of his hands, right? Well, we're man-to-man on this guy, so he's off the page. He doesn't beat us right there. But we get the reaction now, again, as we see it here, getting back underneath this crossing route. So we end up here. So we have everything. All these bootlegs are designed to build layers and build triangles in the passing concept. And defensively, there were no lost eyes, and guys ended up fitting those things just right. But their ability to react to things and the speed and the confidence and the angles they took to react to it was such a growth from previous years.
Yeah, I mean, you can – I'm reluctant to use names. You can see why a year ago, if you're Louisville and you look at film from Ole Miss a year ago, you tell Cunningham, hey, this is going to be there. And then you can see why Cunningham got so frustrated when it wasn't.
Yep.
Because everything about what you just described about what Louisville drew up schematically makes a ton of sense.
It does.
And it should work, except for the fact that this is where the Jimmies and Joes come in, right? That they were different.
It does, but it also, going back to the scheme, and if you want to get caught up in the 6 DBs, right, you now have 6 guys that are playing. They're able to play with eyes. They're not glued to the box, right? The way that these guys played with their eyes was phenomenal. I thought, right?
Yeah.
But because you have these overhangs and these guys that are in position, you're not asking them all the time to go be aggressive. You're asking them to see and correct, right?
Right.
And so the fact that it's not go, 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 oh crap, I messed up, how do I retrace? But it's see it, collect the information, process, and go fix it, right? It's a little bit different style. It's saying, I get it. You're going to nickel and dime me a little bit, but I'm going to make you wrong some too, right?
Yeah. I guess what I was saying is you add a Campbell, you add a Springer, you add a Reese, you add some guys that have a cerebral aspect to their game as well, in addition to being pretty athletic kids. And it just is a game changer for what you're able to do as a coordinator, what you can sort of trust your kids to do. And when you're the Louisville offensive coordinator in this case, you don't necessarily know exactly what it is that you're going to face. And so all you can do is sort of scheme against what DJ likes to do.
Yep. And
you had good schemes and they just didn't work.
100%. Further in that same drive, they show this type of 4 wide formation and they motion the tight end and they moved him here to create an unbalanced set. It was really impressive because as you saw things shift, We came down now, so they created a gap. We just took the gap away, right? We saw this backside safety. He comes down now. So we've now built a 7-man box with 5 box players on the field, and we're able to rotate here because there's no eligible backside. So we're able to get into a coverage situation now where, they can play some type of cover 3. They can play match where they play man over here and pass things off to one another because these guys are playing with a little bit of depth. But now you've committed 7 to the run. So you get caught up in the 6 DB thing. They're not there to cover, not all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So even though it's a 3-2-6, it's still a somewhat traditional 7-4.
It really is. And so what you see was they came out, they created that gap, and they wanted to go and they wanted to run outside zone. Well, we did a good job of fitting it. And he just got a little bit outmanned, but you still have 3 guys out there. So this is the play early in the game. If you remember, you watch it and he wants to cut it. He wants to cut it because we talked about it last week, right? You're trying to press, and then go get vertical right now. Well, what Ole Miss did was they strung it out to all their help out here. So these guys are all going to block. And this is the play where you see Tylen Knight come out of nowhere as the kid's going here and just comes and smokes the kid for a minimal gain. Because again, that's a kid that, say what you want about him when Ole Miss signed him, he was a great high school football player, and he's done a lot of good things at Ole Miss. And he's had some trials and some tribulations, but where that kid's good is when he can go play fast. And he's in a position right now, and what they're asking him to do defensively, where he can do that. And so the kid comes up and smokes the tailback right there because great recognition by the defense, their gap sound, and they push the ball out to the perimeter, and they rally up after a minimal gain. Last year, I'm not going to say it would have happened, but we have seen many times where simple things like this, we would have been a gap down and things would have gashed us.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And sometimes it's on coaches, and sometimes it's on players, and sometimes it happens, but you didn't see it happen the other night against a good football team. And I think that's, again, just a huge takeaway. The last thing I want to talk about is as far as the Ole Miss defense is really, and I'm going to skip ahead, kind of to here. This is actually that same play that we just talked about. So as they bring that guy over and they put him here, you see here's a safety come down. So as they start to run this stretch, it looks like they have numbers. Now, Ole Miss they've protected themselves on the weak side. This is the corner that's now backed up. This is one of those safeties that's now come down, right? If he blocks down, he's going to come off his butt and spill anything out to him. He's going to force the ball back outside to him. If he comes at him, Ole Miss now has a safety that's in position to fit back inside in addition to a linebacker. So every gap is accounted for. Well, when Louisville runs the ball the other way, he comes to try and force it. So he's there. These 2 work combos to there. These 2 work combos to there. In their mind, they've created an advantage over here. But because of the athleticism and the aggression on the outside, we see 4 come up and make the big play. One of the other things that they did, and this was a 3rd and short on the first drive, first or second drive, I believe, where they actually started with 41 was back here in the backfield, and they've got 2 receivers out to the offense's left. And 41 is just moved now to put himself in this position. So they're going to run. It's an NFL play. It's one of the biggest run plays you'll see any Sunday. It's become real popular in offensive football. College level recently, it's known as duo. It allows you to build 3 double teams to work up to defenders. And what the back is going to do is he's going to read this linebacker. Okay. If he fits outside, he's going to trust his combo and he's going to stay downhill. If he sees the linebacker fit inside, he's going to trust again, and he's going to get outside and try to go run on the safety. Okay.
Gotcha. Yep.
So that's the backs read. It's all about I'm creating double teams up front, which are going to allow me to get movement. It's a huge short yardage play. It got real big in the 90s as a way to combat the under front in the NFL. So what ends up happening is as Ole Miss fits the ball is really they couldn't have played it a whole lot better. He comes and forces and boxes the ball here. He lives in his gap, and instead of working wide, he is tight into his fit. So we build the wall here with our safety. He's tight in his fit here. And because we're able to win here and here, he's now able to work over the top if he needs to. And we get this coming down the back line. So if he steps out and he crosses face, that ball now has to cut all the way out the backside where we have a safety and then another safety sitting right outside to pick it up. These are the type of plays that you worry about. Okay, can this defensive structure hold up against Alabama and teams like that? Well, this kid is not Alabama's left tackle. That doesn't mean that kid's not a good player.
Right.
But he's not a top 5 draft pick next year, right? So does it have to look different? Do you have to put another body right here? Maybe so against Alabama. But from a structural standpoint, the scheme still plays. It doesn't hurt you. So, I want to kind of talk about that because I knew that was a concern for a lot of people.
All right, real quick before we go, a little bit about Austin Peay. I know you know Scotty Walden, you know some of the people around that program. What can Ole Miss people expect to see on Saturday?
I started typing up notes, and in all honesty, I kind of ran out of time because I couldn't find a ton of film out there. What I did see, they are a spread offense. You go back, Walden, you're talking about a young head football coach,
31 years old,
and a guy that has kind of done it. He was a Division III player at Dordt University. That if anybody listening right now knows that's in Iowa without looking it up, I'd be shocked. I know because I have a player there, right? And that's the only reason I know. It is a good university. They've had some good football players, but he was a quarterback there, and then he, grew from East Texas Baptist and to Southern Miss, where all of a sudden he has the reins when Jay Hopson gets let go and kind of gets them through that season, and then ends up at Austin Peay as the head coach. So he's a young offensive-minded football coach that is going to spread the ball around, and do a lot of different things. You see a lot of empty. You see some kind of exotic formations in what they do offensively. The scheme is sound. The scheme is smart. They are going to, in my opinion, when I watched the little bit I know of watching his offenses in the past, they're not going to back down. They are going to try to attack you vertically in the passing game. And so, you wonder, okay, last week, everything from Louisville wasn't vertical downfield. This is the week where you're going to see what that looks like. Now, hopefully pass rush plays a factor and you don't get a whole lot of view of what that looks like, right? If you're Ole Miss, that's what you're hoping for. But that's what I think you're going to see. I went and, found some highlights from their opener against UT Chattanooga. And they're an empty, and this is, if you play PlayStation or Xbox, you've probably run this play before, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But it's a simple sound play that has answers for man and zone coverage.
Yeah.
Right. They're running old school smash concepts on outside, and they're putting a guy on the post down the middle. So if you're Ole Miss and you're playing one of your 3 high safety defenses, there's a lot of things that Ole Miss can try to do to confuse coverage. They can rotate and play some type of a cover 3 where maybe he comes down, he comes out.
Yeah.
And, you end up.
Even could come down and that corner could go up.
Right. Easily, right? They can play a Tampa 2 style Tony Dungy made famous defense where now the corners are squatting to play trap. You get safeties over the half, and you already have the built-in middle of the field player instead of asking Derek Brooks to now turn and drop 40 yards and get in the Hall of Fame for it, right? So there's a lot of versatility in what Ole Miss is going to do defensively, right? And we talked about what does that look like maybe against some of the bigger teams, but even against teams like this that want to spread you out, there's so much you can do coverage-wise to change picture for the quarterback and still be effective in the box that I think will be interesting to see, because they're going to do some things like this. This was something that they scored a touchdown on against Chattanooga, where, again, it's another empty principle, but they're stacking receivers now. And what they've done is they've built a zone beater in over here. and they've built in a man-to-man beater over here. If you choose to play some type of man where you're going to come up and be man-to-man here, and you're going to try to play man-to-man on these two receivers, and we talked about this a lot last year when Ole Miss played Florida in particular, because Dan Mullen does such a great job with stack releases. You have to make a decision of how you're going to play these guys if it's man-to-man. You're either going to press this guy, he's going to take him, and now this guy has to go sort through the trash to find the other guy, or you're going to do something where it's, hey, I'm here, you're here, you take what comes outside, I take what comes inside. So you built these man beaters over here, but if you choose to play cover two and he squats on the hitch, now you're asking the safety to go cover this outside vertical, and that's a natural hole in cover two. If you play cover three and you're going to get him out and bring him down, you give yourself an easy throw into the boundary. So there's a lot of real smart design in the little bit that I've been able to watch of Scotty Walden's offense, but everything does seem to be built on we're going to pressure the ball down the field and we're going to trust in our guys to go make plays.
And they've had real success since he took over.
They, 4-2 last year, I think. And, again, they don't play in the SEC, and the expectation is they're not going to have the same players. But one of the first things I did was I scanned their roster. There's a handful of Mississippi kids on that team. There's a bunch of kids that came out of Mississippi junior colleges that probably played with guys on Ole Miss roster. But one of the things that stood out to me as I looked through the roster was how many recognizable high school programs their players came from, right? You're seeing kids pulled out of top programs in Florida and Tennessee, in Ohio. So they're recruiting good players. In the OVC, I believe the Ohio Valley is a conference they play in. That is a great conference at that level, right?
Getting a lot of kids wear the chip on the shoulder.
They 100%. They're going to wear a chip on the shoulder. They're going to come in with a lot of belief and something to prove. And anybody that's been sitting in Vaught Hemingway for the past 20 years knows that sometimes those teams show up in the game. It's a lot less interesting than you want it to be, because it's a lot tighter, right? And I don't necessarily, I'm not going to predict and say that that's going to be the case, but I do think Ole Miss fans have to be aware that this is a really good football team that's coming to town, and Scotty Walden's going to have a good plan. It's going to be let's see what this defense looks like against an offense with a different identity.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be interesting. You don't see a ton of run game, but this is a staple, I think, in what I've seen him do when he was at Southern Miss and what he does now. And it's something that spread football teams have been doing for a long time, where you just pair inside zone up with essentially two hitches as well as a perimeter screen. And from an offensive standpoint, is you believe that unless they're just playing man-to-man, somewhere they're giving you numbers. So it'll be curious to see how Ole Miss chooses to attack some of these things. Durkin's going to be okay giving up some underneath stuff, right? He's going to want to protect the deep ball and take some things away and rely on his athletes to come up and make tackles. And as long as Ole Miss can do that, I think they'll be fine. As far as Austin Peay's defense, I think they like to play an aggressive style of defense. I don't know if they're going to try to do that against Ole Miss for reasons that you talked about earlier. So curious as to what that'll look like from those guys. But it's going to be a little bit of a crapshoot, probably, as far as what we actually get out of their defense.
Pete, as always, man, that was a lot of fun. We'll be back next week. We'll look back at Austin Peay, and I bet, I'm just guessing, nothing against Scotty Walden and the Governors, I'm guessing we're going to spend a lot of time looking ahead to Tulane. Willie Fritz and the people there, they have a nice team. They scared the hell out of Oklahoma, and Ole Miss will have to be ready a week from Saturday for the Green Wave.
Yes, they will. He's probably one of the most underrated head coaches in football, and he's got a good staff and he's got a great recruiting base. So they're a good football team.
Enjoy your weekend. Thanks for the time. Talk to you soon.
Same to you. Take care.
That was Pete DeWeese, taped Wednesday night. Hope you guys enjoyed that. A lot of football there from him, looking back at Louisville, looking ahead to Austin Peay. Also talked some college football with Jeffrey Wright, 92.9 FM ESPN in Memphis. Talked about some conference realignment things that are going on, including involving Memphis, with the Big 12, with the American, potentially with the Sun Belt, the Mountain West, how that impacts Texas, Oklahoma, the SEC, the big picture. And then we talked about a handful of the big games this weekend. Oregon's at Ohio State. Iowa's at Iowa State. We talked about Ole Miss, his impressions of Ole Miss from the win against Louisville on Monday night, and more. So here's Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 FM ESPN in Memphis. Jeffrey Wright, 92.9 FM ESPN in Memphis, joins us again this week here on the pregame show. All right, we're going to get to some Ole Miss stuff in a minute and some national stuff in a second. I am curious, there's a kind of a rumor out there today on the heels of the Big 12 news from last week that might be 6 teams and not 4 heading to the Big 12. Memphis is one of those other teams that's being mentioned. Do you put much stock in that?
I do not put much stock into that because by the time this airs, there will be a story out. Mark Giannotto, my co-host in the afternoon, he actually got Oresco on the phone, and I've not gotten any sense from anyone around Memphis that, thought they were going to be included. And certainly the way that, the fact that Oresco was talking to Mark implies to me that the American itself does not feel like Memphis is on the poaching block. And, we can debate the reasons. To me, like, I don't think it's arguable at this point. I think any conference, if they were going to expand and you're taking teams from the American, I think any conference out there would take UCF, they would take Houston, and they would take Cincinnati. Like, yeah. I don't, to be honest with you, though, I haven't sensed much pushback from Memphis, people that are around Memphis. I think they kind of got that. I think what was fascinating about this to me is that if you look at when this first went down, I do think ESPN was putting the plans in place to move the leftovers of the Big 12, whoever didn't get an invite somewhere else, the leftovers of the Big 12 were going to move to the American. And that was what they had. Where I give Bowlesby credit, he went on that massive offensive and said the ridiculous things that he did. He sent the cease and desist letter to ESPN, and then he started claiming that the American was trying to poach his teams. And you're having to read the tea leaves a little bit, but I know enough to say I think what happened at that point was ESPN sat there and said, okay, we got bigger fish to fry than this. Like, we're not going to get ourselves into trouble with this. But what I really think occurred is I think it made the American get less aggressive. And, I think when you consider conference expansion, I think trying to be the good guy and trying to play by the right rules, if I'm going into business, I personally would rather do business with Mike Oresco than I would with Bob Bowlesby, just as someone, if I'm going to work with him. I actually do think Oresco has been a relatively decent and honest man. But with that being said, it's kind of Game of Thrones, man. Like, in the end, Ned Stark, spoiler alert, got his head cut off. And the Lannisters sat there and said, this is about survival. And this isn't about playing by the rules and playing by some code. This is about, if you do not get aggressive and you don't try to maintain your position, you're going to die. And I still think this is a long way from over. And I'm not saying, like, when I say that, Memphis people get hopeful that, like, oh, there's going to be some 11th hour Hail Mary. No, all I'm saying is I think the Big 12 has not changed its position. This just essentially buys the Big 12 time. In my opinion, the members of the Big 12 are still in the same spot they are. They want out. Like, they want to get anywhere else. So that hasn't changed. And
oh, exactly. To your point, if the Big 10 invited Iowa State tomorrow,
they're gone tomorrow.
They're gone. If the Pac-12 said, hey, Kansas, we've kind of reconsidered, do you want to come? They're out.
Correct. And to me, I think what you're going to see, and I don't know if, I know you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, but because it fascinates both of us, I can't figure out why, but we love it. And it's just so, I think it's the chess piece element, and it's like kind of like putting the puzzle together. It's a lot. It's very similar to me to coaching searches, and we both love coaching searches.
Oh, it's very similar.
But, if you look at conference alignment, even dating back into the 90s, it doesn't, conferences, the power players don't get bigger. It always shrinks. You started Southwest Conference, they get eliminated. The Big Eight and the remaining valuable pieces form the Big 12. The Big East got eliminated last time. Well, now you're seeing the Big 12 get eliminated this time, whether or not they want to acknowledge it. Because when the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen looked each other in the eye and said the Big 12 matters, just not to us, I think what they were saying was twofold. One, I think they were clearly establishing whatever power structure that's going to lose designation. But I think what they were pointing the finger also at ESPN by saying, you can't, this orchestrating, it's not going to work. So the Big 12, we're stamping the Big 12 as our little child that we acknowledge, like it's a legitimate son. And I think that forced the American to, I think at that point it was just too late. And I think if you were the American, I actually think you would have had to do some convincing, because in the end, you're still dealing with decision makers that are from that old school of, well, even if it's diminished Big 12, it's still the Big 12. And it's this A5 designation. Well, Neal, you know as well as I do, in I don't know, 24, 36 months, I don't know when it's going to be, but the next time that we get something in paper, A5 is not going to be a thing. The autonomous 5 is not going to be, and right. Whatever, if it is, the Big 12 is not going to be a part of it. They're going to be in. I don't see the Big 12 has just replaced the American as the next best thing. So I don't know. Like to me, like I think this still has a long way to go. I think Bowlesby's kind of talking out of his ass a lot. I think he's claiming to have a TV deal that he doesn't have. And I think that Oresco, who is a television executive and has worked at these places, I think he knows that they don't have a TV deal. But at the same time, I tip my cap to him in the sense that he's not going to do the thing where he's just trying to keep somebody around that doesn't want to be around.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I'm interested to see kind of the next, because the ball is kind of in the Americans' court. It's in some of the, they could get aggressive here and go poach Mountain West. They could go poach, the UABs of the world. And in some ways,
so to me,
it makes sense. But
to me, I think, we've talked about this. Whoever's going to survive at any, to me, like it starts at the top. First off, what is surviving? I don't know. To me, like the only people that are not doomed, or if you're in the SEC, you're not doomed. I still think if you're in the Big Ten, you're fine. I think they're going to have to adjust the way that they want to operate. But they're not hooked up to a cardio machine. They're correct.
Eating, right.
If they start accepting reality, they're going to survive, and they're going to survive and thrive probably. But to me, if you look at it in terms of how do you survive, I think it's going to be those that get the most creative. And so, if you're the Mountain West and you're the American, you have to come up with, I don't know how you label it, but you got to essentially make a super league of the best of the rest.
Yeah.
You've got to have, and maybe it's, you and I have talked about this, that maybe it's you have a Western conference and your Western teams play each other. That way your Olympic sports, you don't run into the money issue, because while you and I acknowledge this is a football thing, that is, to these types of schools, that matters, because that's money that they can't.
If San Jose State has to fly their women's tennis team to Birmingham all the time, it's going to get really expensive.
So then, you do a Western division, and then maybe you do like a Central division where it's, the UABs, the Memphises, the Tulsas, maybe you have a Southwest division of the Texas schools, and then you have the Eastern division, however you want to do it. And maybe it's this 16-team league with no real tradition or whatever, but I don't think that matters. I think you just have to do that. And you say
all that matters is, can you get a TV deal?
Correct. And then you say, at the end of the season, we meet up and we name a champion that way. And I think that's your best path of survival. The problem that I'm sure is going to arrive is what we've seen in all this. It's tough to get everybody on board when it's every man for himself.
Sure.
And, obviously UAB is going to be in favor of that. Lafayette's going to be in favor of that. Like they're obvious, because they're, in their mind, they're kind of moving up, but you're going to have to talk San Diego State into why this is the best path forward and whatnot. Now, the reality of it is if they understood where this is headed, they would know that. The problem is that I was kind of mentioning earlier, these decision makers are in their 50s and their 60s, and they're so tied to, well, the way that the Pac-12 is always going to be the Pac-12, even though it was the Pac-10, but there's this power structure that they think that's what matters. And what you and I have discussed time and time again, what you consider to be the college landscape and the way that it's structured, that's going away. And I don't know if these people accept that yet. And truth be told, maybe some of these people don't understand. I don't know how many university presidents can, like, they do, in fairness, they are running universities. Like, I do think they have other things to worry about.
Sure.
But I don't think that they're able to understand, hey, if I am Oklahoma State and I've had the Big 12 and I've been a power member my whole life, but really you're trying to tell me the best path forward is the American, like, it doesn't comprehend, to which you'd be like, well, no, if we were playing yesterday, this would obviously not be the right answer, but there is a path. If we align ourselves with these people and with ESPN, there is a path for us to stay relevant. But instead, you've got a bunch of people that are still, they can't, they're set in their ways. They operate the way they do.
We get to a few football things real quick. Do some big picture stuff, because we talked about Ole Miss on Monday night. They play Austin Peay on Saturday. If we're still talking about Austin Peay this time next week, something went terribly, terribly wrong. ACC, a lot of talk about the power of the ACC, whether they have power or not. The ACC, North Carolina loses inside the league. Clemson loses to Georgia. Louisville gets romped by Ole Miss. Miami gets just beaten down by Alabama. Does it say something about that league, or is it just one weekend?
I mean, my gut answer is little column A, little column B.
Sure.
Like, let's be real. How many teams do you think would have played Alabama on Saturday, given the way they played, and kept that within, let's say, kept it within the number, which was 19.5?
Maybe just Georgia because of their defense.
And are you really convinced of that? Because did that Georgia, now granted, Georgia's going to get pieces back later. So that's a question for a later day, before Georgia fans want to save this and be like, told you in the SEC champion. But the way that Georgia was constructed on Saturday night, there was no way they were going to score.
Right.
So,
yeah, I'm just saying, is it possible that Georgia would lose a 20-3 game to Alabama today?
Sure. Okay. But I think we agree that no one would have been competitive with them on Saturday.
Absolutely.
So I don't think you can necessarily hold that against Miami, like, in my personal opinion. And that's just, like, North Carolina. I think I don't know if we said it on this show or whatnot, but I've been telling everyone they are frauds. They're 100% frauds. And, we know Longo's work up close in person. I think that offense was set up for success last year, but with these defenses that had no real practice time and whatnot, and, we've seen that offense when you go up against someone that has a decent plan, there's no answers. They can't run it. Then their quarterback ends up having to run for his life, and it just becomes exactly what we saw. Also, when you factor in with North Carolina, they lost like 70% of their actual production. They lost 2 good receivers. They lose 2 NFL running backs. Like, you don't just replace that at North Carolina. And, I think Howell is nowhere near as bad as he was on Friday. Like, that wasn't a great reflection. But when I started seeing that he was going 1-1 this year, I was like, what am I missing? Like, is this just the classic, the people that are writing about him haven't watched yet, which I understand.
You know how long it takes for national media guys to change their mind. I mean,
there was like draft guys that I respected, and I was like, guys, I don't know what you're seeing on this. And so, and then on top of that, Fuente's a good coach.
Yeah, sure.
He doesn't, inevitably his downfall is going to be he doesn't like to recruit. Well, buddy, this isn't that sport. Like, there's high school and then there's the NFL. Like, go pick.
Sure.
Like, If you can't recruit, like you can't, unless you're going to get a job like Wake, like, Vandy or, one of these places that's cool with you, Duke, undercut, unless you go get one of these schools that's cool with you developing and scheming up. And, maybe we go 4-8 one year, but we're always going to be 7-5 and we're going to be competitive. Unless you get one of those gigs, like that's not the place for you. And that's not what Virginia Tech signed up for. And that's not what they wanted. But he's a good coach, and so they ran into that. I think Louisville's bad. Like I'm not. I think two things can be true. I think Ole Miss can be good, and Louisville can be bad.
Oh, I do too. Absolutely.
But like, if you look at
the fact that Louisville is not world beaters does not take away anything from what I saw on Monday night.
Correct.
I know what my eyes saw on Monday night.
Correct. That game was never in doubt. No. They got the ball. The first possession went right down, took control of the game. They got a quick stop. Whatever. They got the stop on the 4th down, but they get the stop. They make it a 2-score game immediately, and they put the kids to bed. Like that was, yes. But, if you look at their schedule, that could be a team that's only favored in 3 more games this year. And so, I don't know what the reality of that situation is. In general, though, like if you look at the Georgia-Clemson game, I think I kind of nailed that one. Like, in the end, I think I got caught up with LSU, but I think I pretty much nailed Clemson in that they have made up. They don't have the same amount of talent as the biggest of the big boys. Now, Georgia has probably underachieved with the level of talent, but Georgia's roster and Ohio State's roster and Alabama's roster is more similar than their rosters are to Clemson. And Clemson's always kind of gotten by, these offensive linemen that start 40 games and never get drafted. But then they had Deshaun Watson and they had Trevor Lawrence, and it made up for it and it closed the gap. DJ Uiagalelei's immensely talented, but let's not kid ourselves. There's no guarantee he's a first rounder despite how good he looks.
Yeah, don't count him yet. Exactly.
Correct. And they don't have the receivers that they had where you can just say, spread it wide, throw it up. It's a one-on-one, go get it. And, that was a 10-3 blowout. And at no point, Georgia didn't have to score but I just think that Clemson's not nearly as elite as maybe everyone that follows the sport thinks. And where I give them credit is they've made the most of their chances. Like they got into that game. They haven't Oklahomaed this. Like when they get in there, they swing and they've had some big hits. But I think Clemson's actually as a program closer to Oklahoma than they are to the other 3.
Ohio State and Oregon play this week. Everybody's kind of searching for big games to draw trends from and stuff. It's just what we do. And in some ways it makes sense. And in some ways it's silly, but regardless, Ohio State kind of got off to a weird start. They had a weird place to start. They played one of the first games at Minnesota. Minnesota was geeked up, and Ohio State kind of played a shaky first half and then came back and won the game.
Shaky second quarter. I mean, they were up 10-0.
Yeah.
Shaky second quarter.
Shaky second quarter. Oregon, I don't know what I think. I think the guy's a good coach. I just don't know that you can sustain the type of talent at Oregon that you have to sustain to compete.
I think he's a good recruiter, and I think he runs the program. He's a bad actual football coach. You look at he's closer to Kirby in thinking we can just dominate and win like this when that's just not the reality. I mean, his offense is a problem.
I think I know your answer. You like Ohio State big this weekend, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
I do too.
I think this is a bloodbath.
Yeah, I do too.
I watched the Fresno State Oregon game. Neal, it wasn't fluky. Yards per play, everything. That thing was dead even.
My early indication, and I know I'm the great Big Ten defender here, is that the Big Ten might actually have, I think they've got a potentially great team in Ohio State. Because the kids, the quarterback's just going to get better.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
I think what they'll do is they'll get better. They'll get a better grasp of what he can and can't do.
And call a better game for him. Yeah.
Correct. I think they'll be better at that. I think what we also learned was, okay, maybe Fields wasn't Trevor Lawrence, I think we learned that Justin Fields was pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that in the next 24 months in the NFL, that Fields is a good player. Because he's done some things in the preseason that you're like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that.
He is an elite thrower.
Yeah. By the way, and I don't want to jump around because I want to stay on my Big Ten thing for a minute. Your point about Zach Wilson, Matt Corral.
Yeah.
I saw that echoed by a couple of.
It's the RPMs on the ball that really strike me.
Some NFL people were talking about that here in the last 48 hours. All right. So to the Big Ten. I thought Penn State, Wisconsin, everybody talks about what a sloppy, sleepy game it was.
No. First off, that should have been hung in a museum. That was the perfect game at 11 a.m. We had a Big Ten game, overcast skies, slightly drizzly. We had a great atmosphere. We had a punt fest. We had sloppy football. That was like, this is the problem that I have with everyone that wants
you
to
had
just
both teams very quickly realizing, hey, every play matters.
Exactly. And you could tell every time that Wisconsin made that mistake, they knew shit. Like, you know what I mean?
Playing with fire.
Like that. Yes. And, because I was texting with Dylan, and Dylan was like, I want Wisconsin live. I go, I don't. They've turned it over twice. And you don't win those games. Like, you could tell how that game was playing out. And, Clifford sucks, but, he looked better than Mertz. And in the end, they hit two big downfield plays that mattered. But no, I mean, if you want to talk about, I think one of the big questions we're going to have this year with college football is how much of last year mattered. I think it's safe to say Alabama was probably winning a national title without fans. I think given that set of circumstances, Alabama was the best team. And I don't really think it was, I think they proved it.
Sure.
I think it's no coincidence that when Ohio State finally kind of got everybody together, they were clearly better than Clemson. And then, Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's kind of that new team that it's like, they're clearly not there, but they're still, don't kid yourself. Like, it's a good program. Like, it's a 5 to 10 type team for the most part.
Yeah.
But there's just a big difference between that team and the top team. But, I write about it in picks with us. My working theory so far is the teams that were the pleasant surprises last year, and it doesn't take away anything from the season. God bless Tom Allen in Indiana. I faded that, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that didn't feel real. That didn't feel sustainable. That doesn't change the fact that they didn't earn it on the field.
Sure. Yeah, but I know what you're talking about. Like, you kind of saw it with Iowa against Indiana. Yeah. They get their crowd back, and they get a little.
It started spinning away from them, and they couldn't get it back.
They could put their foot on your throat a little bit because the crowd got into it. And you got a little different to try to call plays and to get plays in and to make things happen at the line of scrimmage. The next thing you know, a game gets completely out of hand, and
Penix can't get it back. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So Iowa gets Iowa State in Ames. You talked about this before. Campbell, solid coach, really good program, doesn't have a load of talent, gets a lot out of what he gets.
Yes.
I actually think, and I joke about the helmet and all that stuff.
Great helmet.
It is a great helmet. I think Iowa's pretty good.
I agree with you. I think this is a good Iowa year. You get one of these like every 4 or 5 years. You get this year where it feels like they're headed to Indianapolis to get smoked by Ohio State. But at the same time, like, Wisconsin's already got the early loss that we just talked about in that Penn State game. Nebraska's a mess. Oof. Minnesota just lost their best player. And, we saw without him in that offense, it just feels like things are really, really trending for Iowa. And then on top of that, I'm like you, man, I watched most of that game last week. That wasn't a fluke of what they did to Indiana. Like, they came out, they get the big turnover, they get up on them 14-0, and they never played with their food. They just dominated the whole game. That's kind of when Iowa's at their best. Like, that's exactly what they are. They still, leave a lot to be desired at quarterback play.
Yep.
But other than that, like that, I think that's what keeps them from being competitive against, any of the truly great teams. But this feels very much like the good Iowa year.
Yeah, they're always above average. They're always very steady. And then every so often they
cycle up
to kind of, peak up. And this feels like a peak up because they're better on defense. They're always good up front. This up front looks really good so far. It's just one game, but they pushed Indiana around up front.
And if you kind of look at last year, they were kind of Penn State and Iowa are kind of two of the same coin. Penn State loses the game at Indiana in the first week, and then they turn right around and then they play Ohio State. Okay, well, all of a sudden in a 6-game season, you're 0-2.
Yeah.
I like to make James Franklin jokes as much as the next guy. I don't really hold it against him that he struggled to kind of keep those guys together. Like that's a tough set of circumstances. Iowa's the same thing, a couple of tough losses early, but they both towards the end of the year started looking like what we kind of expected them to look like. And I think that's kind of what I'm noticing in terms of like trying to determine what mattered last year. I think the teams that you have to understand like what to kind of throw out. And I think there were things with those teams that you could throw out. Now, on the other side of the equation, let's take a team like LSU. They couldn't stop the run last year. What got them this week or last week?
They got beat at the line of scrimmage like a dog, man.
So, I think
I don't know how much you got to watch that because
I watched every snap.
The line of scrimmage in Pasadena was eye-opening.
I mean, wasn't those last 2 drives were damning, in my opinion, because you saw, again, maybe there's some, hey, we don't really know the defense yet, whatnot, but whatever. I know what I saw. I saw a group of kids that were like, screw this. Like, they're coming out. They got 3 tight ends. They're starting, they're putting 7 guys on the line of scrimmage and 5 of which are right of the football. And they're just coming to kick our ass. I'm sick of this. I don't want any more of this.
It's one of the reasons, and people have kind of pushed back on me this week because they're like, you just don't like Orgeron. You're going after Orgeron. I'm like, no, it's not that. It's Orgeron walks into the stadium and he's yelling at the fan, which is fine, whatever. No big deal. You know me, whatever.
It's content. We accept it for what it is. It was content.
But one of the words that he used, and again, I'm not offended. You call me a sissy, whatever. I like powder blue, whatever.
Yeah, the problem is he's wrong. The color's amazing.
But what he did was when he uses that word, what it tells me is in the back of his mind, he thinks, we're coming in here to kick ass.
Exactly.
We're gonna line up and we're going to kick your ass. And in reality, usually, I mean, if you tell somebody in a typical year, hey, UCLA beats LSU, you go, oh, wow, they made some big plays.
Yeah.
A couple of fluky plays. They finessed them, maybe a fake punt. I mean, something kind of.
It must have been a college football game where you have the wilds, the stuff that happens that we see in college football. And sometimes there's just no explanation for other than, sorry, people, this isn't good football. It's fun football, but it's not good football.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons we all love college football is that sometimes you'll see a fun college football game.
Yes, you'll see something you've never. Max Johnson, no look, throwing it behind his back. Like, who knows?
Who knows? But what you saw here, though, was not UCLA finessing LSU. It was not UCLA
bad quarterback play.
Yeah, their quarterback was just there. I mean, he did the best he could. But, I mean, nobody watched that kid and go, oh, boy, that kid's playing for the Eagles one day. I mean, but what they did was they lined up and just said, here it comes. I mean, the tailback just shredded them, and there were gaps, and it was –
there were plenty of runs where he didn't get touched for 8 yards.
I know. What is it? I mean, Alabama's going to beat them by whatever they want to beat them by.
Like last year.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, here's the deal. You and I fall into the same category. It has nothing to do with some type of personal, because I get the same thing. Everyone's like, you just hate old Ole Miss coaches. No, I do have context, though. I have a lot of context. I know what he is as a football coach. I have watched this time and time again. I'm sorry. He's not a program developing coach. Can he?
And most coaches, most coaches on the cusp of an ass kicking know it's coming.
Correct.
And that guy had no idea.
No, he
had no idea. But
it's also, I'm sorry, it's alarming to me when coming off of a national title, you don't even get to be in an interview with your new defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Is that not a problem? Because to me, that suggests even the people that know you the best go, we cannot let him have anything to do with this.
It speaks volumes for it. It really does. I think
he really is nothing. He is the best paid mask. Like in the end, whatever, good for him. However, whatever, best of luck. He should have to give every cent of that extension to Joe Burrow.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I'm looking at their schedule. Now they got some get well time.
So they get McNeese and Central. So get ready for the stories about how coach got him up, got him cookies and everything, and he's got him right. And then I think it's like State and Kentucky, maybe
at Mississippi State, Auburn at home. And I kind of liked, I know this is Akron, but I kind of liked what I saw from Auburn. It's at Kentucky, and I think Kentucky.
You mean you saw an offense that wasn't stupid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bo Nix was the happiest person in the world on Saturday.
I told you, I watched that spring game, and I told you, I know it's a spring game, but I saw a kid that was like, oh, I don't just have to sit there and play fake to air while 7 guys are running so that we can create misdirection and allow defensive linemen to come get in my face.
Yeah, it was an offense that fits his skills. So they get Auburn, and I think they'll have their hands full. They go to Kentucky, and I'm telling you, Kentucky's going to be able to get them at the line of scrimmage. I mean, LSU's got more athletes and all that stuff, but it's not going to be a gimme. And then they get Florida at home, and then they go to Ole Miss. And Lane Kiffin watched that linebacker play, or he probably hadn't watched it yet, but if he did, he and Jeff Lebby are licking their chops. I mean,
so here's my question for
you. And then after that, they got Alabama, and they still have Texas A&M.
Here's my question for you, though.
People talk about 9-3, and I'm like, 9-3, dude.
Oh no, this is my question. What are the odds? What kind of odds can I get on him being fired before the Ole Miss game?
I don't know the financials on it, but certainly possible.
Well, I mean, Neal, we know the financials on it. All of a sudden, he's going to be charged with Title IX stuff.
Well, that's my point, is how quickly can you get that stuff rolling?
Based on who you've talked to this summer, wouldn't you think it not unlikely that there is an envelope?
Oh yeah. I think it's a card that they've waited to play, and maybe they do it. Sometimes your best strategy is to, I'll give Pete Boone credit here.
Let him finish it out. Don't give him the
know that they're hung, just let him dangle. Don't get rid of him and bring in some interim that the kids go, oh, thank
Orgeron. God. That's how he got the job.
Yeah, don't go, oh, this guy's better than him. Okay, let's play for this guy. Let's play for this guy. And then all of a sudden you pop an upset or something, and how fans are, they get emotional and they're like, let's stay with Coach Jones.
When it's done, either let him hang himself or bring in the John L. Smith. Bring in the interim that's not getting the job and is going to lose.
Yeah, and maybe that's what they do.
Yeah,
maybe you let Steve Ensminger coach, and everybody knows that, hey, he's not whatever.
Right, you bring him out of retirement because he knows the team.
Yeah, maybe you do something like that. Last few minutes here. You've had a couple of days to reflect on it. Ole Miss and Austin Peay Saturday night. But what do you think of this Ole Miss team today as opposed to what you thought when we did this a week ago?
I think they answered the defensive questions we had. I mean, do I think this is going to be a defense that shuts teams out on a regular basis and a half? No. But, I mean, you and I discussed it on Monday night. They were in position. And the biggest thing for me is they don't look overwhelmed. You know what I mean? Like, I know a lot's going to be made out of 3-2-6, but Neal, you and I both know, like, that's something that there's this weird fetish for. Here's the thing that I don't understand.
Same thing as the conference stuff. It's because it's always one way. But like Chase brought this up on the Oxford Exxon podcast earlier in the week, and he was exactly right. When you go pulling the Pro Football Focus numbers or whatever, yeah. Otis Reese played some defensive end. Otis Reese played some linebacker. He played some corner. He played some safety. Just because he is an nickelback, that's his title. Just because he is a nickelback doesn't mean that he's actually a nickelback. It just means you have to, because fans want a depth chart, You go, okay, well, here's the starting lineup, and here's the 4 defensive linemen or the 3 defensive linemen, and here are the 3 linemen, or whatever. And so they list him as a nickel back, and everybody goes, oh, wow, they're playing with 6 defensive backs. And they kind of are, except sometimes he's not playing defensive back.
Right. It's no different than what Tony Connor, like, I don't remember what they played him at. Remember healthy Tony Connor?
Yes. It was very
Remember when
they basically played him as a, hey,
here's what I care
go
about.
get him. Okay,
are you a 3-man front or are you a 4-man front? Because that does dictate kind of the rest of it. I don't care how you I don't have this weird, I love scheme as much as anyone. I'm 33 years old with a job and I still draw up football plays and I do it regularly. Like I love scheme but I've never understood this fascination about what is your defensive alignment, because in the end, all the 3-2-6 told me was, we think our DBs are our best players.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how to get them on the field.
That's it.
And that to me, like, that's all that mattered. And
because if you ever talk to a coach, especially a defensive coach, but offenses too, hey, when you look at what you want to do, the good coaches are like, all right, look, the first thing is we got to figure out who our best 11 guys are.
Yes, we need
and
to.
Then we put them out there. It's like in baseball. Well, the first thing we want to do is we got a pitcher. Yeah. And then we got to figure out who our best other 8 guys are. And then we'll figure it out. Maybe this guy's a shortstop, but on this team, he needs to play center field or he needs to play second base or whatever. And it's the same thing in football. And then you want to figure out, okay, and where do we have some depth? Oh, we have depth in defensive backs. Okay, so we could move some people around. Where do we not have depth? We don't have depth on the defensive line yet. Okay, well, then let's de-emphasize that as much as we can without it becoming a complete detriment. And then let's build around it. Like if they go into recruiting, for example, and land 4 big-time defensive linemen, I bet they don't play a 3-2-6 next year.
I bet they don't either. And I think the other thing is it's like, okay, why was Reese playing at end? Why was he playing at linebacker? Why was he playing corner? It's like, because they were moving him around and they go get the ball.
Yeah.
Like,
well, they've got him, and you've got Springer, who's kind of a similar sort of player, and you've got Campbell at linebacker, who they used as a spy and was athletic enough to do it. And so now you could. I mean, DJ Durkin smiled more in one game last year than he smiled last week than he smiled in 10 last year, because he actually has some things to work with.
Correct.
He's not going into the game handcuffed.
Yes, and I think now my concern. How many injuries can they afford?
Well, like not many. I mean, and to Kiffin's, in credit to Kiffin, he has said throughout preseason camp, whenever you asked him, hey, what are your thoughts on this team? What are your concerns? It's always depth. Worried about depth. Pretty good with the runs. Worried about depth.
In the old family group chat, I said, I know how I feel about Ole Miss's first 25, and I feel pretty good. The question is going to be, I mean, Alabama lost a starting linebacker this week, and everyone was like, oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, poor kid.
You know what I mean? Like, whatever. There's another. It's the same thing. Like, we've made the joke forever. Just because you don't know the talent's name doesn't mean they don't have talent. They just shuffle someone in there. I think the other thing, if you want to really nitpick, I wasn't as blown away as the offensive line play. And I'm not even just talking how they ran the football, because there's a lot of things that go into how you run the football. I just thought that I didn't see a ton of clean pockets. I saw a lot of Matt making it look better than it was.
Yeah.
And, if you go up against an A&M, I think that could be a problem. Obviously, that's going to be a problem when you go up against an Alabama. And you know what? I give you credit. You've been telling me all summer you thought Drummond, because we had talked about, man, the guy, he's kind of an enigma. I remember talking about this with you last year, that guy looks the part, but never just kind of like put it together. And you had started either hearing rumblings or from what you saw in practice, like you were starting to get convinced that he could be a dude. He certainly looked like one on Monday night. I thought kind of all their skill guys looked pretty good. I think it's going to boil down to the same thing, man. Like, how healthy do they stay up front? Because if their starting offensive line left a lot to be desired, I don't really particularly want to see their second offensive line personally. I don't know how you feel. But.
They only played 6 guys up front. I mean, when Brown went down and I guess Ramsey came in and played 20-something snaps, but for the most part, the starting guys played the whole game. So that's certainly tells you something. People talk about games like this one Saturday against Austin Peay, and what you're hoping if you're an Ole Miss fan is you're hoping that the starters take care of business early, go have a seat, and even though it gets ugly and sloppy and maybe frustrating, you've got to, from a coaching standpoint,
you got to have eyes on the prize here.
You got to get we got to get some guys on film, because even if groups look bad, individuals might look good, and you might go, okay, that guy maybe he's more ready to help us than we thought. You can start making some decisions because the conference plays rolling soon.
Yeah, and I mean, Tulane's good enough to scare you. Ask Oklahoma.
Oh, absolutely.
But really what it boils down to for me is, when I reflect on what I watched all weekend, I said I wasn't 100% sure, but I'm more solid now. If we were going, I think we should start doing this maybe every week. Let's do our eye test ranking. Let's do our eye test ranking. Alabama, I thought, was 1 in the eye test ranking of the SEC. I thought Georgia was 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Ole Miss was 3. And then I put A&M 4. Kentucky 5. Am I insane?
No, you're not insane. You're not insane. So the only difference I have is I had A&M in front of Ole Miss because A&M's defense impressed me. Offensively,
they did, but I guess it also, there's an element of expectation there. And so I expected A&M's. What I think is, I know the kid turned it over for A&M. I think we're about to find out that Kellen Mond was the new Reggie Ball. He's like the worst 4-year starter in the history of college football. This kid, I think, gives them a different element.
The one thing I know about Jimbo is that he will figure out a way to get the best out of a quarterback. And
correct.
And he's going to do that. And he's got time because Texas A&M, they get Colorado, New Mexico, Arkansas, Mississippi State. They got plenty of time to figure some of that out before they play.
As I've always said, one of Jimbo's finest accomplishments, and I understand whether he can rub people the wrong way, he got Christian Ponder drafted 12th overall. He got E.J. Manuel drafted in the first round. He got, if you go through Florida State's quarterbacks that he was there, every single starter got drafted. And I think 3 were first rounders. And every single guy, there was one that should have been drafted. The one that's still playing football.
I covered him at Auburn. He was a quarterback's coach, and I watched him get a lot out of Damian Craig and Gabe Gross and guys like that. He knows what he's doing. Hey,
Jamarcus Russell.
Well, and frankly, he doesn't get enough credit for what he got out of Jamarcus and Matt.
Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. Dude can coach quarterbacks.
He can. Hey, appreciate your time very much. We'll do it again next week.
All right, guys.
That was Jeffrey Wright last night talking about college football, Ole Miss, quarterbacks, Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M, a lot of different topics there that we got to around the college game. Also, yesterday I talked to Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. If you're watching this live, the NFL season's about 3 hours away. If you're watching this tomorrow, the first full Sunday, watching this on Friday, I should say, the first full Sunday of NFL action just a couple of days away, the NFL getting started. So I got some NFL plays from him, a couple of fantasy plays as well. We also talked about Ole Miss. We talked about LSU. Ben had a pretty spirited take on Mississippi State from the weekend past. Mississippi State comes back from 20 points down in the fourth quarter to beat Louisiana Tech. Ben was not particularly happy about it. So you'll hear all of that and a little bit more from Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. I think you'll enjoy. Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports, kind enough to join us again this week. And I got to tell you guys, Ben and I just did like a 5-minute, it wasn't even a pre-show. We were just chatting, a couple of guys catching up on life. And Ben is fired up. We got a lot of stuff to get to. I'm excited about it. Ben, first of all, welcome back into the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Good to see you, my man.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. I really appreciate it. I love the product y'all are putting out on a daily basis, and I know the Ole Miss fans are super behind it. And what an exciting time for Rebel fans. Thrilled to be a part of this every week during the football season.
Lane Kiffin's here, and Ole Miss is winning, and numbers are good. Life is good, Ben. Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood for sure. It is. And we'll get into the Louisville game, but certainly you had to like how that defense looked, just the coaching. It was an exciting Monday night for the Rebel fans, to put it mildly.
All right, before we dive into all that, I know you've got big news about stuff that's happening with you guys in the state of Tennessee. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so since I've been at Barstool, the Barstool Sportsbook app has, we're in the north, basically. We're in Illinois, we're in Indiana, Pennsylvania, Michigan, New Jersey. We just got to Virginia. Everybody's saying, when's this thing coming south? When can we have this in Mississippi? Well, we don't have it in Mississippi yet, but we got it in Tennessee today. And we've got a huge Ole Miss alumni base in Memphis. You can actually go to Tennessee and sign up for it, I'm pretty sure. So Oxford people, if you're ever up in Memphis, you can fire games. And I'm really pumped to see it coming to the South. Tennessee's the first Deep South state. Louisiana is coming soon as well. I think the app's going to be 2022. We still own the Penn Gaming is Ameristar Vicksburg, Hollywood Tunica, and Hollywood Gulf Coast. So those are the same lines as the Barstool Sportsbook, but you can now bet on the mobile app in Memphis, Tennessee. It's a great day. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll be glad when some of that stuff comes here, probably in like 2037 or something. But
they're going to vote. They're actually going to vote on it in Mississippi again next summer, and I think there's a chance it passes. From what I'm hearing, I'm following it pretty close, and I obviously want it in Mississippi too. Because Neal, let's face it, we're in a world where we like everything in our hands. We don't. Don't get me wrong. I obviously love Penn, but like going to Vicksburg or Tunica or the coast, if you're not near them, just to place a bet, like kind of inconvenient, It'd be much better if we're sitting at home able to place it.
Yeah, I'll knock on wood for the second time in just a couple of minutes here. That would be great news. All right. We'll get into the games and stuff in a minute, but you and I were talking about this, and I want to share it with the audience because I think this is I think it's a fascinating remains for me, because I cover it, this fascinating conversation. Because a couple of years ago, I lost my mind doing radio shows. I would do these radio shows, and I want to make this clear to you, to the audience, to everyone. This is not me criticizing John Rice Plumlee at all. John Rice Plumlee did nothing wrong. He was given the job. He played his butt off. He did the best he could. But I would do these radio shows, Ben, where people would say, "This John Rice Plumlee, this thing is amazing. This offense is," and I would just like come through the phone, go, "No, it doesn't work. It's never ever going to work. This Rich Rodriguez, John Rice Plumlee thing makes Ole Miss the cute little Labrador retriever puppy in the room. Everybody loves the puppy. Nobody wants to hurt the puppy, but the puppy's never going to win anything. He's not going to win the fight in this league." And I said, it won't work. That offense won't work. You'll never beat a good team in the league. Never, not once, ever, ever, never. You'll run up points against the third strings, but you'll never do it. And you guys are about to run off a really talented quarterback to Oregon or UCLA or somewhere out west, and he's going to throw for 4,000 yards in a season, and you're going to look like idiots. They're going to feel like idiots. That didn't happen. You know the rest. Lane Kiffin's at Ole Miss. Matt Corral's the quarterback. You in your blog on I think it was Monday.
It was Monday.
You wrote about a really good buy, if you will, a really good bet was Matt Corral at 20-1 at the time for the Heisman. And Corral looked awesome on Monday night against Louisville. Those odds are no longer 20-1, Ben.
No. Well, my thoughts on it were this, okay? I already kind of liked him at 20-1 going into the year because he led the nation in total yards last year. Kiffin, Ole Miss is a big national team. Obviously with the Heisman, it's tough if you don't win 11 games and make the playoffs. But, Robert Griffin did it. They were 9-3. I mean, it can be done. Well, the real reason I re-upped on Monday was because all the favorites struggled. DJ, Sam Howell, and Rattler all looked really bad Saturday. And so the Barstool Sportsbook still had Corral 20-1 on the adjusted odds. Bryce Young was like all the way at plus 150. And so my logic in that blog was, hey, take this right now because Corral's going to tear up this bad Louisville team, and it's going to be like 12-1 on Tuesday. I did not know it was going to 5-1. I thought it was going to go 20-1, like 12 or 15-1. Now it's 5-1. And so, there's no value at 5-1 at all. But I just hope people listen, because if you got a Matt Corral 20-1 ticket, it's going to be a lot of fun to follow this year.
So my son and I, Tuesday night's my night to take him to Tupelo for his club soccer practice, and he was pulling up stuff. He was talking to me. We mostly talk about sports. Usually it's pro sports, but he said, "Hey, Dad, did you see where Matt Corral's third in the Heisman race?" And at first I started to correct him with like, "No, there's no Heisman race yet, man, because one game." But he was like, I said, "Well, who's he behind? Spencer Rattler and who?" And he goes, "Spencer Rattler and Bryce Young." And I thought, whoa, it's pretty interesting stuff, because all of a sudden I get asked this question. So I'm going to pose it to you, but I'm going to walk through it a little bit. I get asked this question all the time. What does Matt Corral have to do to win the Heisman? And the more I think about it, and this is a tall order, he's got to have consistent games like the one he had the other night. And then in a few weeks, when they go to Tuscaloosa, and again, I understand what they're going up against that day, but if he were to put up huge numbers and pull off an upset that day, he goes from being, isn't this a cute little story, to, dude, he's the favorite.
Oh, yeah. No, and the thing is I know it seems impossible and it's Bama, but Ole Miss ain't going to be afraid of them after scoring 49 points last year. Kiffin knows them. The defense is obviously going to have to get some stops, but, I mean, we've seen crazier things happen. Ole Miss has given Bama trouble through the years, and you never know. I think he's either got to win the Bama game or lose close, another thriller where they score a ton and then end up like 9-3 or 10-2 and like beat A&M and win a bunch of these other games. So
yeah, now I would argue with you and say that if they lose to Alabama, he's probably got to go no worse than 10-2. He might.
Yeah, I think you're right. You either beat Bama and can go 9-3, or lose to Bama and lose like one other game.
But I wrote about this on Monday night as the game was unwinding. It was interesting to me that last year so much was made about what happened in that Arkansas game. The 6 interceptions on the road in Fayetteville and all that stuff, and I had, at the time, I had kind of two thoughts. I had one, well, look, Barry Odom gets paid a lot of money to be a defensive coordinator, and he threw a pretty good scheme at those guys, and it worked. But two, he's going to play bigger games down the road, and maybe he learned something from it. And sure enough, I thought Louisville tried a lot of the same thing. They tried to drop 8, show it in different ways, tried to confuse Matt, tried to force him into a fast read, and then someone come over and pick it off like they did in Fayetteville last October. Matt never took the bait, not one time. He played such a clean game. And excuse me, if he's going to play clean like that, it's going to force opposing defensive coordinators to go, okay, well, this doesn't work. We're going to have to take some shots. And that's what opens up the deep ball for him, the long ball. And, man, if he can be that consistently disciplined against the 3 drop 8, sky's the limit for this guy.
Yeah, and also big shout. What about that effort from Dontario Drummond?
He was a stud.
That catch down the sideline before the half, he had 9 for 177. So much talk was, one person's not going to replace Elijah Moore. It's going to be Drummond and Sanders and Mingo and even John Rice Plumlee and throwing to the backs. But man, he came on strong at the end of last year and he looked great. So that's super exciting too. It was kind of one of those nights where Ole Miss looked. I was thrilled. I think Louisville may be bad. I think there's a very good chance they're like a 3 or 4 win team. But even with that, I'm still so encouraged by what I saw Monday, especially, what can you say about Chance Campbell? He took Malik Cunningham out of that game spying on it. And I thought he was a complete difference maker on defense. Cunningham threw for 18 yards in the first half. Ole Miss looked so well coached. Last year you'd see people, running free and busted coverages. The Ole Miss was aligned in the right place all the time. I know Louisville scored some points in the second half and the game was out of hand, whatever. I thought the effort was just spectacular, all 3 levels, and it just so much to be encouraged about. Like I said, the only thing is I do think Louisville might be a 3 or 4 win team. So I do want to make sure I mention that too.
There's no line out there in the main. There probably isn't some offshore book somewhere, but there's no line on Ole Miss Austin Peay. Do you have any, before we move on to some other topics, do you have any thoughts on Ole Miss Austin Peay? What you expect?
I like the fact that, I know Ole Miss is going to get bagged on for scheduling the FCS team here, but when you play a Monday night game, you got to come back and play on Saturday. I think this is the smart move. I know it would have been a tough turnaround to play Monday night and even play Tulane this week, for example.
Sure.
So I think this is the right week to schedule it. I do think the bye week's a little early in the year, which is kind of unfortunate. But I think Ole Miss, this will be fun to see a lot of guys out there. I'm curious if Ole Miss will come out sluggish at all, just because it's kind of a weird thing. But it's a night home game. People are going to be fired up. I don't have too much, I think we're going to get to see a lot of depth. It'll be fun seeing some of the freshmen, though. I think we'll get to hopefully see in the second half a lot of the younger guys in this game. But, I don't see this being any kind of a problem. I do look forward to laughing at the Let's Go P chance, though.
All right. I want to get into NFL and this week's slate, but I got a couple of things I got to ask you about first, because I want to get your thoughts, because we talked a lot about this last week. One is LSU losing to UCLA the way that
I was wrong on that one.
Well, but I really want to get your thoughts on it. And the second one is, you and I both have some North Louisiana ties. I grew up, I could ride my bicycle if I wanted to Louisiana Tech. And that game's on. I've got a niece, my niece Morgan McCready just started her freshman year at Louisiana Tech. Morgan, if you happen to be watching, I love you. That being said, I'm watching the game and Tech's running away, and I'm like, good for them. Look at this. Because, I know what it means at a place like Tech to beat an SEC team. And they're up 34-14.
34. They were down 14-0 and ran off 34 unanswered.
Up 34-14. It's fourth quarter. I'm like, man, what a cool day for all the people at Tech. And then they absolutely just gag it away.
Oh, and the thing is because you mentioned it. So the radio station I work for in Shreveport Bossier carried Louisiana Tech football. So I'm close to a lot of people in that program, including their offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan. They're up 34-14. When Mississippi State had that huge kick return, when they're up 34-14, I literally turned to somebody and said, State's about to come back, because I've seen this. Ole Miss is known for this too. It's like when you play really good as an underdog, but you just can't finish the game. It's like a mindset thing. I don't know what it is, but Tech, through the Skip Holtz era, they had South Carolina dead to rights, they had Arkansas dead to rights, and now State, in the last 6 years, they could have 3 SEC road wins, and they blew all 3 of them completely. And my biggest bone to pick, look, Skip Holtz is a phenomenal coach. I want to say good things before I go off on it. They send more players to the NFL than almost any G5 school. They have like 20 in the league. You look at G5, you'll see teams be good for a few years, and they get a young coach or a good quarterback. Tech made a bowl game every year since 2014. They're one of the most stable programs. There's a lot of great things about them. However, when you have the ball on Mississippi State's 29 with 50 seconds left, you do not freeze the damn clock and settle for a 46-yarder. How could you do that? Your win probability, if you get 2 more first downs, your win probability goes up 25 to 30%. When he did that, I was losing my freaking mind on the stream. I almost did a post-game video calling him out on it. And he just, when you play not to lose, you don't win. And when you're a 21-point underdog on the road, you got them on the throats. How can you do that? And then I have a friend that went to his quarterback club, the radio thing, and Skip said he'd do it again. He owes his team an apology for that. That was the biggest pile of crap. You're on the road as a 21-point underdog.
You have time. It'd be one thing if you only like 9 seconds left. You have time.
Yeah, and then Austin Kendall, they got a transfer quarterback who played behind Baker Mayfield and Murray at Oklahoma and was West Virginia. He played good the whole game. I just couldn't believe it. And in college, 46-yarder from a wide hash mark, who makes that? What do you make that, like 30 or 40%? I don't know. I just lost it.
Pick up 10, 15 yards on a play and completely – just one play, Ben. One play, because Mississippi State's in kind of no man's land right there. Because if you don't defend the deep ball, you can take a deep shot, and yet if you play too soft, exactly, you can get an 8, 10, 12-yard pickup. Yeah.
The only thing I could think of was maybe he didn't trust that quarterback because he came in like May. But Kendall kept him in the game. I thought his effort was spectacular. Tech was outmanned on their O-line against State D-line, and Kendall gave him a chance to win. I thought it was Bush. Like I said, I think Skip's a great coach, but I am so upset for my Tech friends and fans. They should have won that game, and they've got a huge bone to pick with Skip. The fact that he doesn't admit that he was wrong is even more the problem.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I'm probably not as fired up as you are about it. But
man. Well, I'm on that stream with Walker. We were streaming the game from the Gambling House in New Jersey, and everybody jumped on Mississippi State plus 425 when they were down 34-21. And I told him, I was like, I love that. I'm not betting on State. I'm cheering for Tech. But it was just like one of those things, man. It was 34-14 right into that kick return. It's like you could see it coming. It's just something about closing. I don't know. It's like a mindset thing. And Ole Miss has struggled with it forever through the years too. Like we have these great efforts as an underdog, but it's just like when it comes time to close the game, it just can't do it. So I don't know. It was rough.
All right. So give me some you want to start college or pro? I want to get some.
Either way is fun. So weird. The week 2 college slate, it's a little lighter because the big week 1s. I mean, the big games, obviously, Oregon, Ohio State, 11 o'clock early kick. Washington, Michigan is where the Barstool show is going. But, man, Washington losing at home to Big Sky School last week. That probably wasn't the plan.
Give me some college plays you really like.
Okay, well, I've got a few. So this Oregon-Ohio State game, Vegas is making it where Vegas loves Ohio State in this game. Ohio State's a 14.5-point favorite. When they put that line over 14, they're making they want people to take Oregon. I mean, they're making it to where Vegas loves Ohio State. It's an early kick. I don't put too much. Ohio State had a tricky opener on a Thursday night at Minnesota. First game started for C.J. Stroud. I don't think Anthony Brown, the Oregon quarterback's that good. I think they went with the wrong guy. And Thibodeau, who's one of the best D linemen in the country, sprained his ankle last week. Even if he goes, will he be effective? I think Ohio State's the right side here, even with the 14.5. I think it's one of those spots where Vegas likes them so much to put it at that number, they're daring you to take Oregon. And so because of that, I'm taking Ohio State, even laying that many points in that early game.
Okay, like Ohio State, laying the points. Give me another one or two you really like.
And I hate to say this because I'm no Mississippi State fan, but I think they're the right side at home against NC State. I think it's these Mike Leach teams forever. You go back to Texas Tech, you go back to Washington State. They struggle so bad as favorites. You know, you saw it last year when they're favored by 17 over Arkansas. You saw it against Mississippi State, against Louisiana Tech last week. But Leach teams are tough as nails underdogs. And now they're catching 2.5. That line looks super sketchy. Everybody saw State play bad against Louisiana Tech. NC State just made roadkill on South Florida 45-0. But South Florida is Troy Strong left that place on fire.
They're awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad situation.
Like,
so
I feel
like
Florida.
State. I feel like it's like a suckery thing. I kind of like State this week as much as
you mentioned South Florida. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I love Florida minus 29 because of how bad South Florida is.
No, the only one on that one is that Florida's got Bama coming in next week. So, like, I do think Florida's going to kill them, and they can pick the number, especially with the new – you got to think they're going with Richardson after how bad Emory Jones looked last week. But the only thing is just with them having Bama next week, if they get up 3 or 4 touchdowns, they just going to shut it down. That's my only concern. They can kill them. It's just that's my concern in that game.
Give me your thoughts on Kentucky and Missouri. Kentucky at home laying the 5.
I watched a lot of both of them last week. Kentucky, the new offense, they had that Penn State transfer quarterback because their offense under Eddie Graham was like Les Miles LSU. I mean, they literally didn't have a passing game last few years. They brought in a Rams assistant, who's a Sean McVay guy. So they're running a lot more of a more modern offense now. I think their defense is good. I lean Kentucky here. I really do. I think they're going to be pretty good this year. They're sitting in a spot where they've gotten more physical at the line of scrimmage the last few years. You know, they run the ball. They always have a tough front seven. Stoops is recruited pretty well. And I think modernizing the offense is going to help. And I actually like them this year. I think they're in a spot where they can win. You know, when you look at the East right now, Kentucky's sitting in a spot where they could have a very good year with, how much South Carolina, Tennessee, and Vandy are struggling. So Kentucky beats Missouri. They're going to be a top 3 East team here this year. I like them on Saturday.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think Kentucky's got a real shot to be the second best team in the East.
I do too. This Florida thing, I'm not totally convinced unless this Richardson kid and I went off, by the way, on Brandon Walker on Pick Central a minute ago. Just because of his Mullen thing. He said, okay, Florida, Richardson comes in and has 2 good drives in the second half of this crappy Florida Atlantic team. And Walker's on there saying Richardson's going to have a chance to win the Heisman Trophy the next couple of years. Like, man, he had 2 good drives against a crappy CUSA team. And he's trying to jog them. We got into it on Pick Central today. He's like saying, I'm being biased to Matt Corral. Matt Corral led the country in total offense. You're talking about a kid who had 2 good drives against Florida Atlantic. Like, I told him, man, I'll take Matt Corral this year. You could have Richardson his whole college career to win the Heisman.
Here's what I don't get about Walker and Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen left you. Dan Mullen said, "You're not pretty enough. I'm going to a prettier girl. You're trash, and I'm going to something sexier." And he's still hanging on to it. That's weird to me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just anyway. It's just that it is fun. I will say it is. Every day is new and entertaining working with that guy. There's and I'm glad. Speaking of that, the egg thing. I hope y'all saw the college football show last week where I cashed in the final egg on Walker. I had a lot of debate on when to use that last egg. I brought it into the stadium with me for games 2 and 3. I snuck eggs into the Omaha Stadium in TD Ameritrade because the second Mississippi State got eliminated from the College World Series, I was going to smash it in the stadium. I thought it was going to be insane. And then they won it. And when they won it, I'm like, he's not going to care if I crack an egg on him when they won the national championship. He's going to be like, I don't care how much egg you put on me. We want a title. So I threw the egg away and did a little video of me tossing it away, saying maybe later. And I wasn't – so literally 20 minutes before the college football show tape, a buddy of mine here was like, hey, you should use the egg day one of the show. You'll never see it coming. And I was like, you're right. Because I wasn't really sure I was going to use it this fall. And every week I waited, he was going to be more and more on guard. And so I gave a heads up to a couple of the producers of the show, and we had it queued to where when Casey went to Brandon Walker and said Brandon Walker he had Mississippi State's top 10. When he said Mississippi State top 10, that was the cue, and I just went and smashed it. And I thought it went really well.
All right, the NFL starts Thursday night. I'm going to try to get this up on Thursday. That's what she said. But Friday, regardless. Tampa and Dallas. We'll leave that game alone because there's a chance people will hear this and see this at a time that game is already in the books. Full slate of NFL games starting on Sunday. Everybody's got their fantasy teams ready to roll, all that stuff. Give me 2 or 3 NFL plays that you really like in week 1.
Okay, yeah. And speaking of fantasy, check out the Fantasy Football Factory. We're Stephen Shea and I are the fantasy podcast, and we're doing really well. We cracked top 75 already, so excited about that. And then tonight, or actually this is going to have already aired, but hopefully the auction draft that we had the night ago wasn't a disaster. We'll leave it at that. Looking at NFL lines this week, the Sam Darnold revenge game is interesting. I actually like Carolina laying 5 at home against the Jets. The Jets are starting Zach Wilson, a rookie quarterback. First game. And I think Carolina, look, I'm not saying Darnold becomes all pro, but the situation in Carolina with Joe Brady calling plays, Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson is a lot better than what he was dealing with Adam Gase in New York. And I think he gets some revenge there. So I'm going to take Carolina laying 5. I'm real curious about the first Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence game. Jacksonville's in Houston. If you can get it at 3, I like Jacksonville. Houston just went with Tyrod Taylor. Houston might win 2 games this year. I mean, they're with the Watson's on the way out. They're trying to figure that whole mess out, but it's in their best interest to just trade him to get what you can and just completely tank and rebuild because it's such a bad situation. So I kind of think I'm leaning Jacksonville there, even with it being a first road game. I also think Myers been holding some stuff back. I'm looking at that one, and there's some interesting ones week 1. There's some tougher lines, honestly, this week. It's not the easiest. The Denver Giants game is very interesting to me because you never want to be on like a public underdog, and everybody's taking the Giants +3 at home. And I think Denver's the right side, and I'll tell you why. The Giants O-line, they fired their O-line coach in like camp because of fight. They hired Rob Sale as a Monroe guy, bringing him up. Then you have O-lineman walking out, retiring in camp. Denver's got, Bradley Chubb back and Von Miller back and really good secondary. And Bridgewater's extremely boring, but he's not going to screw it up for you. And so I'm kind of thinking Denver. I'm taking a look at Denver there. I think the Giants are too public of a home underdog. So that's another one I'm looking at. The Saints, Green Bay one, I think is a no play. I do like the Saints scheduling it in Jacksonville because Green Bay, Rodgers is 3-4 in Florida. Green Bay struggles in that heat a little bit. But with everything going on with the Saints, Biden and stuff, I don't know that I can take them either. So I think I'm going to step back and watch that one.
Got a couple of fantasy plays that are good ones.
Yeah, well, I just mentioned it. I think the Sam Darnold thing, the Jets allowed 275 yards passing a game last year. Robbie Anderson played with Darnold for the Jets. Now they're together for Carolina. I really like both of those guys. Be on the lookout for DJ Shark, who I think can make some plays in this Jacksonville offense. I think they're going to be a little more wide open. He's playing in Houston on that fast track. I think he's a guy that's kind of a candidate, maybe to have a little bigger game than people think. Those are a couple. I think that's what we'll roll with here. Raheem Mostert for the Niners playing Detroit. Mostert's kind of a guy that's really good when he's healthy. He had 151 yards week 1. He kind of struggled staying healthy. I think the Niners come out and run over Detroit. So he's a guy I like to.
Great stuff, Ben. As always, man, really appreciate you making us a part of your week. Look forward to doing it again next week. Ole Miss and Tulane next week, which I think is an interesting game, maybe a little more interesting than Ole Miss wants it to be. So that's one we'll talk about a lot this time next week.
Yeah, thank you very much. And still trying to figure out when I'm going to make Oxford this fall. I know I'm going to get there at some point. I'm going to play the World Series of Poker. And they're having it this year in October. And so because I'm doing this Vegas thing, it's kind of stalling out this Oxford. But we're going to get down there at some point. And shout out to Walk-Ons, who I know is a sponsor of y'all's. I've got a really good relationship. I've gotten to know them through my ties with ESPN Baton Rouge. Love those guys. Walk-Ons gave $100K to the Barstool Fund to help small business, not just a corporate chain that doesn't care about the small man. I mean, they believe it. They live it. And I love that they're coming to Oxford, and just big fan of their brand.
Yeah, one of the things I love about walk-ons is how much they contribute to like high schools and how much they participate in the local communities, that kind of thing. All right, I said last thing. This is very last thing. Oxford versus Ruston, biggest high school game in the history of high school football in Shreveport on Saturday. Ruston,
I'd love to be there.
Whoa, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, the whole world will be tuned into this one.
Hey, Neal, I know this sounds crazy, and people are like, Barstool, you got the dream job. Is there anything you missed? I miss calling high school games on the radio on Friday nights. I know that sounds crazy, but I loved Louisiana 5A. Just something about being there. I grew up around it. And I mean, I'm at Barstool. I love everything up here, but I swear I miss this Friday night.
There's not a football player alive that doesn't wish you were the voice of their high school football team, Ben. I mean, with your energy, like a Ruston Neville game last week, it would be absolutely awesome. All right, we're going to I think we just lost our streams. I'm going to let you go there. That was Ben Mintz. We'll be back with more. Lost that stream with him in the last 10 seconds or so of that recording. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Ben's always full of energy. We'll have Ben back with us again next Thursday/Friday when we do this before Ole Miss Tulane. This is normally when we talk to Ryan Brown of Next Round Live in Birmingham. I said this at the beginning of the stream, but that was about 2.5 hours ago. Ryan had to speak at a funeral today in Birmingham, so we'll get Ryan back with us next week. We'll talk about Auburn and Penn State, some of the other big games. Ole Miss Tulane, obviously. We'll talk about some of those games next week. Earlier Thursday, Chase Parham of RebelGrove.com spoke with Ole Miss Athletics Director Keith Carter. It's brought to you by Visit Oxford. Take a watch.
Ole Miss Athletics Director Keith Carter now joining us. Keith, I was just thinking about this. Lane talked about it being his first Walk of Champions, first time through the Grove and everything else. With everything happening in 2020, it's kind of your first normal football weekend too, isn't it? Is the permanent AD?
It is, and it's exciting. We got pretty weather, and everyone's excited about the Grove and getting the stadium full. So there's going to be a lot of firsts, which is exciting. And I know Lane's excited, one, to get into the stadium, but he's talked a lot about that walk through the Grove. So I'm anxious to see what that looks like.
You guys made the announcement, I guess, a pretty good while. We had Dr. Boyce on our podcast. I think he mentioned it whenever that was. But just to finally get here, knowing the Grove is open, getting the normalcy that comes with the full weekend, the full experience of everything, what kind of relief is that for you guys?
Well, it's exciting, first and foremost. I'm excited for our players, our coaches, our fans. They've been through a lot. Everybody's been through a lot with COVID, and obviously we're still dealing with a lot. A lot of cases still out there and folks in the hospital, so we got to monitor all that. But, I think there's a balance to that too. People want some normalcy. They want to get back to their routine of coming to Oxford on Friday and going to dinner on the square and doing the Grove on Saturday and heading home on Sunday. That's what we do at Ole Miss. We're good at that. And so, it's exciting. I've obviously been in Atlanta, earlier this week, everyone was excited about that game. But so many people talk to me about this weekend, getting back to normal in Oxford and staying at their house and, doing all those things. So I think it's going to be really fun. There's tons of excitement around the program. And, I think people are ready to get back and have a good time with it.
Lane obviously mentioned it on social media early in the week. What is sort of the expectation, tickets available, that kind of thing? What's sort of the general rundown of where things stand?
Yeah, we're pushing, I think we're going to have a great crowd. Right now we're not slated to have a sellout. We actually have quite a few tickets left. So, if you're interested in coming, we've got a seat for you. We sold about 8,200 student tickets, which is pretty good. I think we're going to have some walk up there too as well. The night game should help. The weather's great. So I think the crowd's going to be great. Military Appreciation Weekend. It's going to be some, really cool things going on in venue. So I think we'll have a great crowd, but that sellout, we're pushing for that. And I think that, Lane's really talking a lot about, one, it helps you win the game first and foremost, but it also helps with recruiting. It helps as you got this boisterous, loud stadium full of people, as recruits watch that on TV or in the venue, they see what that's all about too. So it's going to be a little bit of a process. We know that, but we're asking folks to come and be loud and be early and have a great time.
You guys do the surveys every year. You get fan input. You always look to enhance the game day atmospheres and different things. You don't have to necessarily run through them, but anything new, anything kind of different or switched up for this year that fans can expect when they get in attendance?
Well, I think the thing they're probably going to notice first and foremost is the DJ.
Right.
We got a DJ going. And so I've heard, a few mixed reviews. I think people are kind of anticipating, what that's going to be, what kind of music they're going to play and all that. But, that's going to be right there at the bottom of the student section. We know that the game atmosphere is driven by those 10,000 people down in that north end zone. So we want them to be having a great time. We want that DJ to be interactive with them. So we think that's going to be really good. But, Paris Buchanan, who does our marketing and our in-game, script and all that, he's done a fantastic job of adding a few new little things here and there. Obviously, just with the, from an amenity standpoint, we've listened and what people want in their suites and their clubs, in the seating bowl, those type of things. But we understand how important it is to make that game atmosphere great. Every game's on TV now. It's easy to sit on your couch at home and watch the game. So we want to make sure that people feel like, hey, I've got to be there because I don't want to miss what happens in the vault.
As you mentioned, a lot of people with dinners and music things around town. I mean, Visit Oxford's doing the Tunes Around Town on Friday for every home football weekend and things like that. But, I guess it's also an emphasis for the people that want something a little more family-friendly. You got soccer a lot of weekends. You got volleyball a lot of weekends. Obviously, Matt Mott's team coming off Sweet 16 appearance. Volleyball team off to a pretty good start this season. So a lot of things you can kind of mix into these football weekends.
You really can. I mean, there's no shortage of events in Oxford on a football weekend. I think sometimes we go a little over the top with events. There's just so many different things to do that they're kind of stepping on each other. But, going to a soccer game is fantastic. Coach Mott and his team, they're doing really well right now. Sweet 16 last year. Volleyball's 5-0 right now. They're doing great as well. So, there's just so many things to do on a football weekend. And, if you want to stay busy, you can certainly do that.
So you mentioned just in passing a second ago, but obviously huge night on Monday night, getting the win over Louisville, having the entire kind of college football or football world to yourselves on that evening. I know it's an obvious question and there's not really a number on it, but just from a brand, from a program standpoint, what did that night sort of mean for you guys?
Well, it was huge. And, obviously with the news of Coach Kiffin not being able to be there, in some ways that gave us even more of a spotlight. Obviously he was on College Game Day Saturday talking about it. He had some spots pregame, halftime, postgame. Lane is just such a dynamic personality and national personality already. And I think that was, that added to it. But, that Monday night game, while it may not be the best for fans attending the game at times because you've got to go back to work on Tuesday and do all those things, as far as the national exposure, I'm not sure it gets any better than that. Obviously, we come out and play great and, jump into the top 25 in both polls and all those things. So I think from a branding standpoint, we got our money's worth there, probably more than we – if it was a marketing budget, I'm not sure we could have had enough money to spend. But, we're really excited about that, and hopefully we can build on it throughout the season.
Where do you sort of sit on these neutral site games versus, on Sunday night, you got Notre Dame, Florida State that looks like a home and home deal. I mean, how do you sort of balance that? What do you feel about these more, I guess, made for TV events?
Yeah, that seemed to be the trend there for, a 10 or 12-year period. And we played our share of them. The one that we had Monday night was the last one we have on the schedule currently. Not to say that we wouldn't add one at some point, but it would have to be the right one, the right venue. We do think that there's a trend to these home and homes, finding some cool matchups where folks can come to Oxford and we can return the favor and vice versa. So we've got some of those on the schedule moving forward. But I think overall the trend's maybe shifting a little bit away from the neutral site matchups to more of the home and home, but not saying that we wouldn't have one of those in the future too.
What do you sort of attribute that to? What do you think that has shifted that back to the home and home?
Well, I think that, when they started doing it originally, it was cool to either start the year somewhere I think it's gotten expensive for folks. I think people are traveling and they're realizing, these games are on TV. It's hard to go to Atlanta or Charlotte or Orlando or those type of things, and hotels and all of that. So if you could add a pretty marquee, cool matchup onto the season ticket package where it's a home game, and then maybe the next year you decide, hey, we do want to go to that college town or that venue that's somewhere we've never been. I guess the watered down part of it is a piece of it too. Folks have been to Atlanta, they've been to Nashville, they've been to these games over the years. So finding something new and creative, I think, is important. But not saying that these cool matchups can't happen in the future as well.
Yeah, and some of this too. I mean, all the TV dollars. I mean, good for you guys, good for everybody. It's needed with everything going on, but TV more than ever, I guess, dictates times, dictates days, who you're playing, the whole deal, to the point that you probably have a little bit of a difficult time balancing, hey, we need certain times to make the attendance as good as possible and different things, while also making sure you give credit to those TV providers. I mean, is there a certain scheduling balance that has to go into that?
Well, I wish there was.
You're really, kind of at their mercy, aren't you?
Yeah, really, we're at the mercy of the TV, which, we get a nice check at the end of June every year that we really appreciate and put that in the bank account with no questions asked. But it does cause some problems. This year there's the new ESPN Plus game where every school has to do at least one game there, which that's this week for us.
Sure.
We get to pick the time on that. So that's kind of a new thing, that when it's on the Plus, we get to pick the time. Obviously, we chose to play at night. And then next week, I think we're on ESPN2. We play at night as well. So we kind of avoided that 11 o'clock September game. We don't play another home game until October 9th. And so maybe the weather's a little cooler by then in case you do have an 11 o'clock game. But, there's so many factors that go into it. But, at the end of the day, we're going to play the game. My only thing is I wish we knew earlier. You got this 2-week window where that the next game. I wish we knew those times in advance. And I get it. Again, it's TV. They want the best matchups at the best time slots. But I think that's hard on the fan too, when you really don't know until 2 weeks out what time the game's going to be and how you need to make your plans.
What went into, was it just potential heat, it being a night game this week? What did you like about that time slot?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the main thing. We just want to make sure that it's cool, the sun's down, and folks can enjoy the game. It allows people to, we knew it was going to be their first opportunity in the Grove. We wanted them to have a full day there and enjoy that and do all that. So the night game made a lot of sense, and then obviously the next one was a TV choice to play at night as well.
There's been some talk about when Texas and Oklahoma get inside the league, or even potentially before, being an NFL type thing where every time way in advance, and they go ahead and map it all out. Something you would even be for that level of extreme?
Well, I would. I'll be honest, I'm not sure we're ever going to get there, because I'm just not sure that TV's going to, say 10 weeks from now, here's the matchup we want, even though that those teams are, 2-8, or whatever. So I think there's always going to be a little bit of a flex hybrid there that we're going to have to work through. But I know the SEC knows that's a priority, and it's something we've talked a lot about as ADs and staff, that, hey, we need to try to, hone in on these times a little sooner and quicker. And I think they've listened to that.
So I guess going into the weekend, what's the couple things you're most excited about and just getting back into football season?
Yeah, I'm excited about military appreciation. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some cool things planned. One really cool thing that I wish I could tell you about, but I can't. Well,
you can. You know it. Go ahead. It's fine.
Nobody's watching. Just show up and you'll find out. But I think that's great. Obviously, a lot of factors around this military appreciation. 20 years to the day of 9/11. Obviously some of the things that have happened, in the recent months in Afghanistan, and I just think that's something we really need to do, is honor our service men and women. We're really appreciative of what they do for us and keeping us safe, and we're gonna have a big day. But it's just fun to be back in Oxford for football. Fun to be back in the VOD, and I am anxious to see Lane walking through the Grove. I think it's gonna be really cool.
You mentioned it. I'm just kind of curious. I guess I was a high school senior. Where were you when you found out about 9/11? What was going on that morning? Everybody kind of has that story that's old enough to remember it.
Yeah, I was actually in Italy at the time. My wife and I had just gotten married, and we were there, and we were 6 hours difference, 7 hours difference. So we really didn't find out right away. And we went on in and found out at a restaurant with some of my teammates, and it was just super surreal. We couldn't get a lot of information because we were so far away, didn't really know what to do. Should we come home? Should we stay? But it was horrific, and I think it's something that obviously as the years go by, it seems like people forget a little bit of what that day was and how unified we were at that time. And so I when we were talking about what we wanted to do on Military Appreciation Day on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, I said, we need to blow this out of the water. We need to make sure that everyone understands that we remember and that we respect and admire, the people that protect us every day.
Just kind of curious. I don't necessarily want to finish on a more somber note, but being out of the country like that, was there even more almost concern or whatever the adjective is because you're not even necessarily in the States, you're not seeing everything, or is it almost a weird thing where you feel disconnected from it because you're not around? I mean, how do you feel like that might have differed from a person who was inside the country?
Yeah, I think there was concern. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm from a small town of 900. My wife's from Tunica, Mississippi. We're green behind the ears. We're in Italy for the first time, and so we were scared. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know if this was the first of a series of events. We didn't know as Americans abroad, were we going to be targeted?
Mm-hmm.
Those type of things. So, but we had great teammates and great people there that took really good care of us. Obviously, a lot of communication back home, and I just remember, when we left to go to Italy, you go through an airport and it was one way. And then when you come back from Italy, it changed forever. The way that security
Right.
was administered, and just so many things changed that day. And so I think it's very important that we remember that and we make sure that, and hope that it never happens again.
We'll look forward to what you guys got planned for a Military Appreciation Weekend, obviously big weekend in Oxford. So enjoy it and good luck on Saturday.
Awesome, Chase. Good to talk to you.
That was Keith Carter. Appreciate his time. Appreciate all of you involved in the stream. Thanks to all who have listened. I know we've gotten a lot of feedback on this show, especially the time with Pete DeWeese each day, or each at the beginning of these shows. So we'll look forward to doing it again next week when Ole Miss plays Tulane. We'll be back with the MPW Digital Postgame Show on Saturday night, right after Ole Miss and Austin Peay. Probably hit the start button a little bit before that game ends, and then we'll stay with you for, I don't know, a couple hours, whatever. We'll keep an eye on some of the late games. We'll talk about the other games that have been played earlier on Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. If you're traveling to Oxford, safe travels. If you're traveling anywhere, safe travels. And we will talk to you on Saturday night after Ole Miss and Austin